All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Everyone, if you have a seat, if not, first matter is the roll call.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Castillo?
Here.
Ms. Gill?
Here.
Ms. Litton? Okay, she's not here. Ms. Russell?
Here.
And Mr. Webb?
Here.
Thank you.
Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would seek a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Number one on the agenda is our Henderson Middle School and George Mason High School highlights.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody, and happy end of the school year. This will be our last board meeting, official board meeting before the end of the school year. I want to thank all of you for your incredible work this year and the students that are here for your incredible work as well. This evening, our spotlight on Team FCCPS is on Henderson Middle School and George Mason High School. This is a complement and follow-up to the Spotlight on Learning that we did last month that featured Jesse Thackeray Preschool, Mount Daniel Elementary, and Thomas Jefferson Elementary, where our two principals have had an opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that they've done this year. And at this point, I would like to invite up to the table Valerie Hardy and Matt Hills. Valerie, of course, is principal at Mary Ellen Henderson, and Matt Hills is principal at George Mason High School. So in case the board has any questions of them after, after we do the presentation. So with that, we will start the spotlight. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Valerie Hardy, finishing up my second year leading the learning here as a principal at Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School. This year for us has been a year where we've really been putting the pieces of the division placemat together. We've had a lot of good this year, and we've had a lot of growth. So when I think about our work around race and equity, right, we've had some pretty challenging moments that as a school community, we've had to rally, dig deep, and figure out how do we work together to tackle some tough issues. And out of that, we've been able to have student voice in some of those areas, as well as parent voice. So it's been really good for our community to come together and figure out how are we going to focus on making our school system safe for everybody, regardless of race, religion, gender. So that's been a really intentional work that we've done this year. We also had an awesome opportunity this year with our naturalization ceremony. So being able to bring in people who are becoming naturalized citizens to the United States coincided brilliantly with what we were learning in our civics class. So for our 7th grade, they were able to watch students become citizens and really live out that IB philosophy of how we're trying to build our learners in all of those traits. What has been really great as we think about the good, the great, and the growth is the work that we have done intentionally around race and equity here at Mary Ellen Henderson is not just our work, it's the division's work. And Dr. Noonan's been super supportive of that and helping to lead that in our community as well. So we have been able to work with some consultants who we know are going to work with our internal Falls Church City equity team to help figure out how do we make this impactful for not just our students when they're in school, but also out in the community. We've had some great business partnerships this year. Up first, I definitely want to make sure that we talk about Capital One. They have been fantastic in bringing the Capital One coders to us and really offering students opportunities to explore coding, and then also walk away with some really big tangibles like new laptops and new tablets to continue the coding, and most importantly, a huge $10,000 check to help continue our coding efforts here next year, as well as Envision and Marcon, who've helped to support our STEAM initiatives. Those have been opportunities that have allowed our community to come in. Part of our community outreach has been obviously community partners helping us, but also us giving back to the community. The longstanding tradition of Give Day is something that we've been able to continue to raise even more meals that we've been able to package and send. And this year we also introduced a sock drive that our PE dynamic duo spearheaded, and students purchased socks, and those socks and the fundraising efforts helped to donate prosthetic legs to people across the world who are in need. And our students were able to purchase enough socks and raise enough funds to have 4 legs donated to people who had lost limbs. And we were able to see those people and the impact it's had on their ability to live in their communities. And additionally, we got socks that we were able to donate here to a local shelter. So we kind of are making sure we go full circle in how we're supporting our community as they support us. Giving students voice, especially at this developmental stage, is critical. And one of the things that we have really wanted to increase this year is how are we asking students what they need, what they want, and giving them some voice and helping to shape how we are giving them the educational experience they need. We've had students create surveys to help us gauge where homework levels are and stress levels. Most recently, we've had students talk about how they can leave their impact in terms of social media and a project that they can leave with that. Our big event that we've been able to do this year was, which is something that I credit our student council with, is we launched our first student town hall. And that is a place in where students, teachers, administrators, we all have equal footing, and we all have an opportunity to talk about things that we're striving to do to make our school community better. Some of the recommendations are things that are easy to implement. Some of them are things that we need to problem solve together. But we can't really educate our students till we know what they need. And so an intentional focus for us next year is going to be keeping that student voice at the forefront to helping shape how we are educating them in their academic learning. As we stay in line with our division, at Mary Ellen Henderson, we have 3 goals that we've been working on in our school action plan this year as well. The first has been our multi-tiered systems of support, and that is where we have our weekly conversations in grade level team meetings where we talk about students by name and need. What's been really great about that for us is as we've talked about students by name and need, we've really been focused on how are we tracking data, how are we then using different instructional strategies to meet students where they are. And sometimes that's not always academic, right? We really have focused on the last 2 years around getting our math processes tight, getting our reading processes tight, and we really used this year to focus on, so what are those other social, emotional, and behavioral pieces that we need to start to get tight so that we're meeting the whole child need and really living the IB philosophy here. The second action plan goal that we've had this year has been around IB. And for us, that has really been doubling down on our efforts to have unit plans that are comprehensive, that really meet all of the elements of providing the full richness of IB, from the key concepts that are created to how teachers are implementing their assessments and their unit plans. And I'm super proud to say that that goal has actually been met and was met in April. And we're excited about the summer writing that'll help to build those units out even further. And then our last goal has been something that I know our division has been deeply committed to, which is supporting our students who are serviced in special populations and really closing those achievement gaps. We've had some new positions come into the division that have supported us with that work, as well as our own internal positions with a math specialist, and have really been able to differentiate and bring in those strategies that are good for all learners, but really targeted at making sure that our learners who we want to see the greatest gains with thrive in the classrooms. Going into year 3 here, I am excited because I feel like all of the work that we have done last year, all of the intentional focus we've done this year around students, the community, collaboration, and ultimately our action plan goals, we are in prime position next year to really sort of hit the ground running and stretch ourselves as professionals and stretch our students further. We've got some exciting things on the horizon. And ultimately, I'm just excited that we've got all the right people on the bus to make it happen, whether they're teachers in the building, parents in the community, our local community resources, and ultimately our students who make coming to work every day super fun.
Welcome to this year's State of George Mason High School. My name is Matt Hills. I'm the principal here at George Mason, and it's hard to believe that another year has flown by. I am so excited to share with you and showcase some of the unbelievable moments that we've had this year. First, I'd like to start by talking a little bit about some of our goals for this year. One of our goals was really to make sure that we were focusing on student well-being. The program we developed this year, called Wild Horse Wednesdays, was really in an effort to address the social emotional learning piece that often we miss as educators. This year, students met in their stable groups. They had anywhere between 10 and 15 students and a teacher or a mentor who facilitated many of the topics that we discussed this year. Topics such as mental health, topics that included also the IB learner profile traits. One of the things we did that we were so proud of, we actually ended up getting a world-renowned mental health speaker named Russ Szabo, who came in and talked a little bit about the challenges of mental health and making sure that we really destigmatize that particular saying. So we want students to be able to openly discuss how they are feeling, which can ultimately help everyone as we work as a team in this particular building. A second goal of ours at George Mason was really to focus on language instruction with many of our EL students. And so one thing that we did this year was we started a LEAP cohort. This is a model that we really want to use moving forward, but it's an opportunity for us to meet the needs of the individual learners in our building. We talk about student data. We have teachers from all different subject areas and disciplines who have those students in their particular class talking about what can we do to ensure the success of each student. We have seen a rise in many of our scores, especially when it comes to our math SOL scores, as well as our reading SOL scores. We have just so many wonderful teachers in this building that are instructing our students in a way that is so unique. When you think about project-based learning and using the IB learner profile traits to make sure that our students are learning about the academics, but they're learning about life skills. As we move towards a more standards-based grading model, one of the things we're really trying to focus on is making sure that students attain skills that will allow them to be successful beyond high school. This year we've had many of our math teachers who have been experimenting with a math workshop, which is really a small group collaborative learning model, and students are always engaged with the material in small groups. We had several of our coordinators, including Mr. Seamus O'Connor, who assisted us in the beginning of the year and has helped us with that professional development component that really our teachers have used to benefit all of our students in our building. When we think about high leverage instructional practices, one of our teachers that truly exemplifies how we focus on student-centered learning in FCCPS is Mr. Mark Robarge. He was our FCCPS Teacher of the Year. And when you think about clear objectives, critical thinking, and creative expression through IB art, Mark Robarge does it all. One thing we are so proud of at George Mason is we've been piloting a standards-based grading program in our Language and Literature 9 courses. So this practice really aims to transform assessment, and we want grading to be ultimately more fair, accurate, and aligned with our programs, all the way from pre-K up to 12th grade. And that includes our PYP, MYP, as well as our diploma programs. Next year, we are beginning a standards-based grading cohort with 40 teachers, both from the middle school and the high school, and a lot of our practices that we've used this year will be implemented moving forward. We can never forget about all of the extracurricular activities that happen at George Mason. When you think about how talented our students are inside the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, their artistic and athletic accomplishments are second to none. From the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime to the continued excellence of George Mason High School band and chorus, to the third World Championship qualification for our robotics team, all of our students in this building continue to excel. I'd love to highlight our athletic seasons, which include a boys swim state title, amongst other strong seasons. Our students continue to showcase their excellence at every single opportunity. I am so proud of what the George Mason High School students have accomplished this year. This continues to be an incredible place for students to learn. We really truly focus on the whole child. As a community, I strongly believe that our growth mindset helps us understand that we collaborate, apply strategic actions, and continue to strive to excel. As this school year comes to a close, it's hard to believe that in less than 2 years, we're going to be moving into a brand new building. We are so unbelievably excited for the groundbreaking, which is happening in less than a week, June 14th at 2 p.m. And it talks about how we are continuing to improve on our practices as a high school, as a division, and all of the exciting opportunities for our students moving forward.
Any questions from the board? Oh, thank you. Do you have any questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Russell.
So, Mr. Hose, you talked about that the focus was going to, I guess, for this year has been on the student well-being and the mental health or impact. So I'm just curious if you have any metrics or any ways that you're measuring the success or the impact of the stable groups and the Wild Horse Wednesdays, like if there's any kind of feedback that you're getting or any formal measurement that you've been doing for that.
No, that's a wonderful question. All right, thank you, Ms. Russell. If I could, I'm going to invite my two assistant principals, Dr. Kevin Clark and Mr. Dave Sorensis. They've really been leading a lot of the work that you saw in the video. But you ask an excellent question. So recently we sent a survey out to our entire staff just to get an idea of the different areas that we may need to improve on, understanding that this is a new structure that we put in place for this year. We also sent a survey out to our students, I want to say about maybe 6 weeks ago. Earlier, about 2 hours ago, we actually met as a team and we kind of went over some of the data to determine some of the changes we're going to make for next year. One of the things we're looking at are really theme-focused points for each particular grade level. We recognize that, as a school, we all share certain beliefs and different things that we want to do for our students, but I think there are significant, differences within each grade level that allow those grade levels for success. For example, our 10th graders are working on the MYP personal project. Our 9th graders, may need that social, learning part that can really help them be successful. And then our juniors and seniors can focus on the career and college readiness component and service learning. And so we've kind of incorporated that into an entire school, but I think next year we're really wanting to focus on more of a grade level model. So it's a great question. We're going to continue to give surveys to students on a semester basis to make sure that we can use their feedback. Just as Principal Hardy described, our student voice in the building is very important. We want to hear from them and we want to use what they say to make any necessary changes moving forward.
Other questions or comments from the board? Yes, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to all of you for your leadership over the past year and dealing with a lot of big challenges that are going on. And one of the things I was struck by, Ms. Hardy, was you're speaking about the student voice. Can you tell us more about that and how you've made that work this year?
Sure. It's actually been sort of organic, which has been really great for us. Sort of starting from some of our work in December around race and equity, the students, very similar to our high school students, felt the need to really try to say, not in our house, right? And so giving them an opportunity and a platform to say, what is it that you want to say and do? So we allowed them to sort of gather and process, how can you be a good friend, right? How can you be that bystander that helps to support students who maybe are struggling when they see inequities happening? But it also spurred into other areas, right? So as we started to think about instruction, part of the entire IB philosophy is around feedback to students. And when you start to get that feedback and ask them what is it that they either need to be able to have success in the classroom, they give you lots of anecdotal points along the way too. So we said, do you want to figure out, right, how to meet them? Let's ask them. So we did a lot of surveys on Schoology using that platform. And when I say the response rates were high, I mean a building of 608 to get 270 responses back, right? It's pretty good data on where the pulse of our students are. So they've been really candid in that. We've given the SCA ownership in saying, you all lead this. This isn't just us, but how do you help us get that information that we need to know to help better educate you? So it's really been sort of that leveling of the playing field. Adolescents aren't afraid to tell you what they're thinking. And I think we've given them a safe platform to let them know we're here to support them and they feel that. So it's really helping us shape how we go into next year thinking about that at the forefront.
Yes, Mr. Castillo.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Could you just touch briefly on how you two and your teams work together? Because I know Henderson and GMHS are cheek by jowl, and there's a lot of exchange going on. So could you talk a little bit about how you collaborate?
Yeah, I mean, I think Valerie was just pointing out to the fact that we spend a lot of time together, and that's definitely by choice, but also by necessity, because we have so many different programs that we share. She was just talking about Student Voice, and I think about the Hustangs, right? A group where we have several of our high school students who come over and serve as mentors for the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And, you know, it really is, when you talk about meaningful collaboration, you can continue to name 4, 5, 6 different opportunities that all of our kids have to work together. But, you know, it's something about the connection that many of our kids still have to Henderson. And I think that it's a testament to Principal Hardy, the faculty, the teachers that, you know, many of whom I saw at graduation. So I think it's organically there, but it's also part of the intent, right? It's part of what we expect out of our students at the high school, and I know what she expects out of her students at the middle school. So it's about continuing to make sure that we create these opportunities for students to collaborate while we are also collaborating ourselves, whether it's on the schedule or you name it.
And I think one of the things that you highlighted in the video was the standards-based grading work and that pilot. And really, that's been a collaborative effort with all of the APs. I mean, Dr. Dippold, Dr. Clark, Mr. Strensis, that's really been their work that they've been leading. And as we think about that cohort and MYP, right, it spans 6 through 10. So organically, there's a need to align programs and practices. And so Matt and I were just chuckling, 43 teachers will actually be in that from both buildings next year. And it's another great opportunity for us to dig into this work together, to do it side by side, and I think to continue to foster those relationships that are needed as we go through this transition together. You're leading it.
I think just to highlight exactly what she was saying is that our teachers, who many of whom are coming to us and asking to be part of this opportunity, I think is very special. Not only because it aligns with the program of MYP and the philosophy behind the IB programs that span at this point pre-K through 12, but because we think it's going to be great for kids and great for learning. And so it's, you know, we've met numerous times throughout the past year, both with a core team of MEH and George Mason folks, Henderson and Mason folks, as well as teachers now who are getting ready to kind of launch on this. In addition to short Wednesday meetings that we've collaborated with, you know, over the past 6 years between the schools to make sure that our programs are top-notch and that teachers are doing excellent work for kids. On the spot.
Ms. Hardy, I was wondering too, there was the great joint PTA meeting where Natasha Kolaros was there speaking about failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of focus on failure, negative focus, a lot of anxiety. Could you talk a little bit more about that and how we can get past that?
Yeah, it's been my principal coffee series this year has really been around that. We did a shared read with parents to sort of talk about that piece of how do you accept failure as part of growth and not see it as a negative. But we kind of peeled the layer back. I think Mr. Castillo was talking about that specific meeting where we talked about, as parents, right, our own need to live a certain way and have a certain projection and what that puts on our students. And I think it kind of comes full circle when you hear about the work being done around social emotional learning, right? And so we've tried to create those pockets of conversation where we can say, failure is about growth, and if we can start to change that narrative with ourselves as parents, ourselves as educators, our students will start to see that as well. So no one rode a bike, right, the first time? No one came out walking, right? You had to fall down and learn. So part of our message has been around that, and building that as ourselves and educators is hard because we don't like to not do something right the first time. But I have to model it, right? I think I've had some pretty public modeling this year. But I think that that's part of how we learn and grow. And I think the more that we normalize that, the safer it becomes for our students. And then they know it's really about learning, not about the grade.
Any other comments? Questions? Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the way you do model such positive energy for all of our students and for our community. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks for a great year. All right, next on the agenda is public comments and requests. In accordance with School Board Bylaw 2.30, the time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Additional written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to board members and for the record. Do we have any comments? If anyone has not submitted a written comment and would like to come up anyway, do so now. Okay. Seeing none, we're going to do a quick amendment to the agenda to move our closed meeting after our recognitions and reports because there are so many great students here we'd like to recognize tonight. Mr. Anderson, would you please do that? Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that we move items 4 and 5, the closed meeting and certification thereof, to after the recognitions and report, and that would make the recognitions report a new item 4, and then move from there.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Litton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Thank you very much. So we now move on to our new section 4, which is recognitions and reports. And first on the agenda is item 6.01, our Team 1418 robotics highlights.
John, is there a video? What's that? Oh, sorry. As members of the team are getting the video queued up, I want to take just a second to thank the leadership of the robotics team, specifically Steve Knight and Cricket Moore, who are here tonight. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Cricket, for your incredible leadership of the team. As Matt mentioned in his State of the Schools, this was the 3rd international qualification in how many years? 3? 3 in the last.
We're starting our 15th year.
How many?
We just finished our 15th year.
And so
It's been 6 times.
6 times to the international.
2007, 8, and 10, as well as 14, 15, and 16.
All right. Well, there you have it. An incredible international presence for George Mason High School's robotics team. Meanwhile, I'm going to tap dance just for a little bit more as that's coming up, because we had a really interesting meeting, and this might be interesting to the community too, with Virginia Tech yesterday, talking about their potential move to redevelop the site right next to George Mason High School. And as part of the conversation, they would be potentially moving their School of Architecture to that Northern Virginia site with redevelopment. And as the dean of the architecture school at Virginia Tech was talking about the design and architecture for the future, he specifically said architecture of the future is going to be reliant on robotics. And I was fortunate enough to be in the room when he said that, because I said, you've come to the right place, because we have an internationally renowned robotics team. But he said robotics, AI, and sustainable architecture are the way that we're going to be they're going to be moving into the future. So I just want, as the team is getting ready to share a little bit about your experiences, to say that the work that you've been doing is future forward and really implicates, I think, in many ways, what the work of design and architecture and urban sustainability is going to look like for the future. So thank you for your incredible work. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you all to introduce yourselves, just in time. Introduce yourselves and share with us your presentation.
Okay. Good evening, school board members. My name is Tahsin Sheikh, and I'm a rising junior on Team 1418.
Hello, my name is Sophia Hartney, and I'm also a rising senior on the team.
It works. Okay. First and foremost, we'd like to thank the school board for all that they do to support Team 1418, because we really would not be able to do all that we do without your support. That's why this evening we are super excited to share with you all the achievements we have earned this season.
For the last 15 years, we have participated in the FIRST Robotics Competition, or FRC, under the larger organization of FIRST. Every year, we are challenged to create a robot from scratch that can play in a game with and against other robots. The game changes each year and is released worldwide in early January. We then spend the next 6 weeks designing, building, programming, and ultimately practicing with our robot. It's a time-consuming process, with members spending up to 200 hours each on it over the 6-week build season.
So this year, we had to collect balls and hatches, which are donut-like discs, and place them and deposit them onto specific locations on the field, which is around a basketball field size. And in the last 15 seconds of the total 2-minute 45-second game, we were asked to climb onto a platform. So, okay, that was our reveal video. It'll be up on our YouTube channel, so you can always watch it there. But in the video, we basically show off our robot, and this video is typically released in like the 6th week of our build season, where we get to show off our robot to the other teams around the world who are also releasing their videos at the same time. So we would have brought our robot tonight, but it's kind of big, so she had to stay at school.
In terms of competition this year, Team 1418 was up to the challenge. In our first district event, we made it to the finals, but lost by 1 point in the tiebreaker. However, we won our second district event, adding another blue banner to our collection.
We then traveled to the district championships held in George Mason University. There we headed our own alliance, but were knocked out in the quarterfinals. Finally, we qualified for the World Championships in Detroit, Michigan, and along the way, we also won several awards, such as the Innovation in Control and Excellence in Engineering.
Besides building and competing with our robot, we also participate in a number of events throughout the city in an effort to inspire the younger citizens of Falls Church to explore STEM for themselves.
For example, this past year we showcased our work at the Virginia Tech Maker Faire, the Memorial Day Parade, and in the Mary Raleigh Stiles Public Library. We also organized a Code Day event at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School, helped run an FLL tournament in Mary Ellen Henderson Middle School, and worked with Baruti Camps to provide STEM after-school classes.
Additionally, this year we continue to advocate for a fund designated for STEAM education for underprivileged students K-12 in the Virginia House of Delegates. Some of our members lobbied and traveled to Richmond in order to testify for the bill, HB 2780. One of the members of the team also planned and executed an international trip to extend STEM to remote Nepal in order to broaden our outreach efforts further than ever before.
Having to design and build a functioning robot in 6 short weeks is not without its challenges. However, every single member of the team has been able to gain a variety of skills from being on Team 1418. We learn how to collaborate as part of a team when we have to discuss and figure out how to design our robot. We learn how to organize fundraising and outreach events, and of course, we learn so many skills related to mechanics and programming in an environment that is virtually impossible to create in a classroom.
And this unique experience helps Falls Church students a huge amount. 100% of our past members have pursued higher education, and they are equipped with the skills they need to succeed, both in college and when entering the job market. This especially rings true since in our rapidly changing world, STEM jobs have become more and more in demand.
Okay, I mean, the picture is just a picture of a robot, but building a robot and funding some of the other outreach efforts that we do is by no means cheap. Because of this, we spend a lot of time fundraising on our own, securing sponsors, and building relationships with a variety of local businesses. However, the generosity of the school board has truly helped our team continue to grow and thrive, and for that, we thank you all.
As we look toward the future, we hope to continue our growth, especially once George Mason moves into a new school building. Thank you again for all your support.
Come up and have a picture.
Oh yeah.
There you go. You're fine. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, next on the agenda is item 6.02, our Champions of Character Spring Athletes.
I'd like to invite Julie Braven up, our awesome athletics director at George Mason High School, to talk about the Champions of Character for Spring 2019. Ms. Braven.
I mean, it's on. Okay. Hello, thank you for having us. I just wanted to introduce our Champions of Character. They are selected by our coaches as being the athlete on each team that represents respect, integrity, leadership, and sportsmanship. They've had a tremendous impact on each team, but also on the athletic program as a whole. They are outstanding leaders who, whether we're winning or losing in our athletic contests, are always representing Mason in excellent fashion. Tonight, unfortunately, with graduation happening early, we only have 3 of 10 here, but we have 3 outstanding people who would love to give a little summary of their season. So we have Sammy, Henry, and Nina.
Hello, my name's Henry. I just finished my 3rd season on the George Mason lacrosse team. Last season we graduated over half of our team. So going into this season there were a lot of question marks all over the field, but we came out strong and went 4-1 before our conference play and ended up qualifying for the playoffs and losing to the eventual state champion in the regional tournament. And one of the things that makes the lacrosse team so special to me is it's a very small team and we sort of have a family-like atmosphere, and that's what makes me look forward to practice and games every day.
Hi, my name is Nina Dunjashaw, and this is was my 3rd year on the George Mason track and field team. And this year was our 5th district champion win, and we also had our 4x4 team as state champs. Our team lost a lot of good people last year by seniors, but we had a lot of freshman talent this year that really proved essential to gaining those accomplishments. And this team, even though it is an individual sport to some extent, it really shows that even with just running your event, it isn't just about doing the workouts, it's creating a community as a team and creating a positive environment for everybody around them so that they do have a good mental attitude while running their race, because it does affect your race. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Sammy. I'm the champion character for the tennis team this year, and this year we made it to the state semis, but unfortunately we lost and couldn't repeat our state championship from last year because we lost a lot of good seniors, as both of them said. And this year we're losing a lot of good players, or our best player on the team, which is really unfortunate, but we hope to be better next year.
We get a picture? All right. And by the way, you guys are going to be the really good seniors, right? That's right.
All right, next on the agenda, Section 6.03, recognition of student representatives to the school board advisory committees for the 2018-2019 school year. If we could please have James Weichert, Zach Holmes, Elizabeth Snyder, and Evelyn Duras come on up. We'll do, yeah.
Actually, why don't we go over
Well,
there?
sure,
Because we're
we've
going to
got
get
some
your
certificates
picture,
for you.
and we'll give you the certificates at the same time.
And now, following on that, we will do the introduction of student representatives to the school board advisory committees for the 2019-2020 school year. So if we could have all of our new representatives who are here come on up. We have Grace Tarpagard, Evan Lawrence, Megan Boson, Marie Roche, Emmy McDonald, and Omika Patak. Did I say that right? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no, we're going to get a picture.
We're going to do a picture with you. We're here.
Before they sneak away, though, to further just make sure you're on the hook, we're going to just announce to everybody what committee you are serving on, because I think it's important. Grace is going to be on business in education. Evan is going to be on daycare advisory board. Megan is going to be the gifted and talented liaison. Marie is going to be our LEAP, which is our ESOL committee. Emma is going to be on SEEK, which is our special ed advisory committee. And Umika is going to be on H&W. And that just slipped my mind. Health and wellness. Thank you. I was doing good until I got to the end there. Health and wellness. Thank you. But thank you all very much. And many of the chairs of those committees are actually here tonight and doing presentations from this year's work that they were working on. And I know that they'll, if they remain in the chair position, will really enjoy working with all of you. So thank you in advance for coming to the meetings and being part of it and letting your voice be heard. You know, one of the things that Ms. Hardy said in her speech was the importance of student voice. It's not just in the classroom, it's not just in our schools, but it's also in our community. And you have a really unique opportunity to make sure that your voice is heard on all of these committees. So thank you very much.
Thank you for serving and giving up your time for us. Next, we have 6.05, recognition of our 2018-2019 student representative to the school board, Acacia. And we have a resolution for you tonight, framed, we'll give all credit to Ms. Goodell, to thank you for your great service. Oh, yeah, should I read it? Yeah. I'll read it for you. Okay. Whereas Acacia Wyckoff was appointed in June 2018 and since July 2018 has served the Falls Church City Public Schools with distinction as the 2018-19 student representative to the Falls Church City School Board. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff is an active member of the Falls Church City community as a founding member of the Young Democrats Club at George Mason High School and an active member of the GMHS School Band as a clarinet, saxophone, and piano player. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff applied and became an integral member of Mustang Ambassadors Program, welcomed by a supportive community from her first days at GMHS, Ms. Wyckoff wanted to give back and make other new students feel as welcome as possible. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff was selected as a CBC Youth Representative for the Falls Church Democratic Committee and diligently dedicated tremendous time and effort volunteering at many events, Ms. Wyckoff was recognized for her hard work and was rewarded with the honor of introducing Senator Tim Kaine at a local event. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff has been selected to attend Girls State and has been inducted in and is an active member of the National Honor Society, recognizing her innate and distinguished academic qualities. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff brought passion, persistence, leadership, innovation, and motivation to her in-class and extended endeavors, and moreover, utilize these strengths to demonstrate responsibility to the student community by sharing content in student-friendly ways and tutoring students in need of academic assistance. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff challenged herself each year of high school by taking advantage of the school's offerings of honors, AB, and AP courses, Ms. Wyckoff is an International Baccalaureate Diploma Program candidate. Ms. Wyckoff will graduate with a GPA of 4.418. And whereas Ms. Wyckoff was selected as a National Merit Scholarship Award recipient and will receive a substantial scholarship to attend the University of Richmond. And now therefore be proclaimed that the Falls Church City School Board extends its highest commendation and deepest appreciation to Ms. Wyckoff for her exemplary services to the City of Falls Church, to George Mason High School, and to the extended community, and offers their sincerest congratulations and best wishes as she graduates and pursues a college education. We're going to come over with your resolution.
Sorry to put you through that, but so you can see Ms. Ray. Okay. She helped us gather all that information.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
And thank you. Akeisha, you've really been a great student representative, providing so much information and feedback for us and representing the student body so well. Thank you. And now we will appoint our 2018-2019, or 2019-2020 student representative to the school board. Is she here?
Yep, she
Yes,
is.
hi. Okay, I don't want to mispronounce your name.
Come on
Would
up
you
to
come
the
up and
table. It's Niharika.
Niharika.
Niharika Singh.
Niharika Singhvi. Well, welcome, and we're looking forward to working with you this year. And I need a motion to appoint Ms. Singhvi to be our representative. Would someone like to make the motion? And then we'll take a picture.
Madam Chair, I move the school board approve the appointment of Niharika Singhvi as the student representative to the school board for the 2019-2020 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Liddon. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Great. So, welcome and come on up. Let's do a picture.
Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Now move on to section 6.07, our annual reports to the school board and oral reports from Health and Wellness, Business and Education, our LEAD, Daycare Advisory Board, and Special Education Advisory Committees. Let's start with Health and Wellness.
Hi, I'm Susan Dimick. I'm chair of the Health and Wellness Committee. Oh, not on? Okay, there, sorry. I'm Susan Dimmick. I'm chair of the Health and Wellness Committee. Thank you for having me this evening. I first wanted to let you know that I have a wonderful committee. My student rep, Zach, was great. We all appreciated his input, and we also really appreciated our staff liaisons who are on our committee. We had a very productive year. First, we promoted 2 bike walk to school days, one in October, one in May. We're really grateful to our schools for helping us with this promotion, especially the PE teachers, and we'll continue to do biking and walking to school again next year. Second, we placed weekly health tips in the morning announcements, and we'll do so again next year. Third, we launched a Wait Until 8th campaign to encourage parents to sign onto a pledge to delay giving their child a smartphone until 8th grade. We'll continue to do outreach on this next year. There's maybe not as much interest in the MEH and above student population, but there is interest in the elementary population. And we feel if we get a core number of parents in the community to sign on to such a pledge, it would make it easier for those parents to not be pressured by their children to have smartphones. We explored the issue of vaping, juuling, and e-cigarette use by our school-age population. Rates are increasing dramatically in our region and in our schools. The committee heard from Principal Hills on the issue. He noted that it's a problem at both Mason and MEH. He estimated that half of our high school population has tried e-cigarettes. There are currently 2 e-cigarette stores in the city, and students also purchase product online. While the governor did sign legislation raising the purchase age of tobacco products from 18 to 21, it doesn't really have much teeth. There isn't much in the way of fines. So we expect to do more on vaping, juuling, e-cigarettes next year. Finally, the committee organized a very successful series of talks to educate and raise awareness among Falls Church families on issues relating to anxiety and depression. The committee identified these topics last year by interviewing FCCPS counselors. Presenters spoke on instilling grit and resilience among children, study skills, parenting in the digital age, and the self-driven child. Attendance averaged about 72 adults per talk, and we also provided childcare with usually around 8 kids there. After each talk, we surveyed the attendees to find out what future topics would be of interest to them. Topics include stress, anxiety, effective parenting, technology and kids, depression, sex, drugs, and college applications. Next year, the committee will continue to organize talks around issues of interest to Falls Church families. Fall topics include vaping, juuling, e-cigarettes, anxiety, and a workshop on parental controls for technology. We look forward to a productive 2019-2020 school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dimmick. Any questions from the board?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is business and education. Ms. Connolly?
Hello, School Board. I'm Mary Beth Connolly, the staff liaison to the Business and Education Advisory Committee. Our chair, Cheryl Fisher, was unable to be here this evening. We had a good year. We had 4 meetings. James Weichert, who is still here, I believe, was our student representative, and he's the first student representative we've had who attended all of the meetings. So, Grace, we're looking forward to you meeting that next year. And you saw the rest of the report that was submitted by the committee, but the Business and Education Advisory Committee is very committed to making sure that the community partnerships are promoted within the community, that teachers know what is available to them, and that our business community remains active and a good participant in the school community. So thank you for your support. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Next up is LEAP, Mr. Boson.
Okay, now we're good. Hi, I'm Paul Boson. I'm the chair of the LEAP Advisory Committee. And just to make sure, does everyone know what LEAP means? It's kind of a confusing acronym, Language Instruction Education Program. So it used to be ESOL, but LEAP is a well-established program in our division. And this year, I wanted to cover just a couple of things that the committee has been looking at, and then also leave a moment for questions if anybody has any. So first, we started off each meeting with the help of Jeannie Seabridge and Jen Santiago, the staff liaisons, taking a look at the demographics, trying to understand well the picture of what's happening in the division and its student population. And in that respect, I wanted to leave you all with something which I think everyone knows, but it's important as we look long-term about how serving this special population works. The number of LEAP students in the division has increased quite dramatically. And if you look back over the past 4 academic years, LEAP student headcount is increased by 51% in terms of students receiving services, so 51% in 4 years. If you also include students who have exited the program within the last 2 years and are still being tracked, the number of LEAP students has increased by 69% in 4 years. So now these are not huge numbers, so it's very different than Fairfax County, very different than Montgomery County. But having said that, for our division, it's quite important. That brings me to my second observation, and something that we've paid a lot of attention to. I want to thank the leadership of the division, Dr. Noonan and others, and you all too, for caring enough to look at both strategic and structural changes, and also the kinds of people changes that can enable us to serve this special population. So the Family Resource Center, which is something that the committee has talked about going back 4 or 5 years from before I was on it, came into being last summer. And I think it's a very important and strategic way for us to serve these students and these families better. In addition, it's a people story, as is so often the case. So Jen Santiago, looking at LEAP from a divisional leadership perspective. And also in the Family Resource Center context, the appointment of Erica Zabayos as a Family Resource Center coordinator is a very important step and one that speaks volumes, to the families that the division serves. Ultimately, and third, I would comment, though, it does leave us, with a lot of questions in the air. So as we do start to serve students well, as we structurally position ourselves, one of the things that our committee has looked at, we don't have as much of a tradition as some of the committees of doing different initiatives, different programs. So health and wellness, I'd commend you all. It's really impressive what some of the committees have done to support these issues in the division. We, though, took a look at different areas where we might engage. And one of the things that came up again and again, and actually came up in the context of the Health and Wellness Committee's work too, is college planning and the way that is such a source of stress and practical needs, for all families, but especially for special populations. Anyways, this is an area where working with Sia Knight, the Dean of Students at GMHS, and the counseling staff, we will hopefully be able to support through different members of the committee volunteering their time, and also maybe other members in the community volunteering their time to connect with families, connect with students in a very relational, very respectful way. Starting in August, we've been talking about a program of monthly events where the families, in the LEAP student population and students, we have separate discussions with students and with engaged members of the community to help people through the college planning process. That being something that Erica Zabayos, she's wonderful, but if you'll just look at the numbers of people who have these kinds of needs, we do need to think about how do we come alongside and serve these families well. I'll leave you with one final thought. Which is, I can't say enough about the people on this committee. It's true in so many areas in Falls Church, but Emily Boland, Sonia Ruiz-Bolanos, Carrie Carlson, Gloria Clement, Wynn Dayton, Thomas Ragland, Gabby Sandos, Ruth Sejas, and then the student rep, Evelyn DeRoss. Just a wonderful, wonderful group. And working with both Jeannie, who we loved working with, and also Jen Santiago increasingly. It's been wonderful being able to work with these people and to hopefully serve you all and the community. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our representative from Daycare Advisory Board could not be here this evening, but we'll go on to our Special Education Advisory Committee. Ms. York.
All right. Okay, it's good? Okay. All right. Thank you for having us tonight. I would like to say we had a fabulous year. Couple of the highlights from our meetings, we enjoyed being able to get to know Rebecca Sharp more and also working with Seamus O'Connor. We heard a lot of really positive things about his addition to the staff, and I think he's definitely brought a lot to the special ed programs here. So we were very grateful with his addition. We also got to have visitors from all of the high schools. The principals came from each of the high schools and the program coordinator from Jesse Thackeray, and so we each got what we felt like some close, good conversations with them about what was going on in the schools and how they were supporting our students. And we also were able to have, we got to start our year off with Lisa and Jeannie coming to go over the division placemat, which was also very nice to kind of review all of that with us and talk it through with us in terms of all the information that was on there in the direction of the district. So let's see here. Then one of the things that we have been making a point to do is to go visit all of the schools. So our meetings were definitely spread out through the city. So we were able to do that and very much appreciated the tour of the new Mount Daniel. That was really cool to see and very nice to see the kind of, how everything finally worked out. It's lovely, and it continues to make us super excited for the new addition with the new high school. I think it's going to be incredible and a great addition to the city. So thank you all. Everyone is very grateful for the work that everyone's put in and getting that ready to go. So let's see here. One of the things that we were in big support of this year was the addition of the ASL class. And we had a committee member, Valerie Budney, who really kind of took the lead on that, with all of us standing right there with her, behind her, cheering her on. But she was definitely our spokesperson and reaching out to members of the school board and the principals at the schools to kind of talk it up and continue to push for that. And we're again, very excited about that. I think that's going to provide a lot of opportunities for our students with disabilities to be able to try to go for that advanced studies diploma. The language oftentimes can get in the way when you struggle with reading and writing in your own language with your learning disabilities or whatever disability that it is that is your challenge. To be able to have that opportunity, I think will be great. Also, the youth mental health first aid course that was offered, that was absolutely incredible. I can't get over the involvement from both the staff and the community. I think it was over 100 people that participated, both parents and staff, and we have classes that are going to be held again in the fall. The interest is obviously there. We all know that the concern is paramount right now with our children and daily struggle. And a lot of times it's hidden. And so being able to have more people that are aware and know how to support the students, and for the students to be able to see that green lanyard and know that there's somebody that they can reach out to. You never know when your turn's going to come and that they're going to come calling. So expanding that reach, I think, is critical to the mental health of all of our students. So that was definitely something that we're very proud to support. And then the critical decision-making points that the VDO has put together for students or for parents of students with disabilities. That is also a great offering from the VDOE. The supports and the trainings that come from the VDOE are incredible, and they're so willing to be able to come out and spread information and share it and help with training and help with support. And I know Rebecca has been able, I think they're going to be coming here to be able to offer some of that, or they did train the trainer, that's what it was, train the trainer, so that we can offer that to our community here, so that not everybody has to travel. So 4 staff members were trained to be able to do that, and also good information, trying to expand our reach to the community and talking to parents and helping them to be informed when they come to the table and be able to know how to ask questions and what those questions should be, and maybe not feel so lost in what can be a very overwhelming process, and overwhelming from start to finish. It doesn't matter if your child is identified with a disability when they are in elementary school or preschool, or if they're identified in high school. Along the way, the needs and how they change and what the parents need to know to be able to support their students. So this training, I think, will be very beneficial to our families. And then, let's see here. Oh, just then our what we'd like to look forward to for next year. So we did have the presentation last year on executive functioning, and we'd like to continue to explore that. It had a lot of people that attended and had a lot of interest, and that still continues to come up at our meetings of an area of concern. So we would like to be able to kind of continue to keep a focus on that and maybe find some more ways to share information with the community and reach out to the staff, and how can we connect the actions and the supports that the staff is doing in the schools, kind of take-homes that the parents can be able to use and support their children, so it's consistent from the school building and then on the home front. When you can streamline that and share that information and they can work together, it definitely seems to be a lot more successful. So again, just ways that we could maybe work to encourage more of that. We would also like to see if there's a way to stretch our Best Buddy program. It's incredible. But we would like to see, I know Best Buddies doesn't work in the elementary, but what could we do if there's something that we could kind of come together to incorporate the students at the elementary level with what's going on with our Best Buddy program, whether it's connecting them to certain events or doing our own unofficial junior Best Buddy program. I mean, we're trying to kind of talk through ideas, but that's also something that we'd like to kind of consider moving forward. And then last is we will always continue to put a plug in for Parent Resource Center. So continue to keep the focus on that and hope that we will be able to expand on the one that you've gotten started this year to include our students with disabilities and their families. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Yes, Ms. Litton.
I just want to say thank you to Jenny for her leadership this year. She's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so now we will go into our first closed meeting. Would someone please read us into close?
Madam Chair, pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter. Personnel under Section 2.2-3711A1, in particular staff appointments, staff reassignments, staff resignations, staff retirements, staff performance, staff separation, staff change in position, non-reappointments, child care leave, long-term medical leave, and leave of absence and advisory committee appointments, and student matters under Section 2.2-3711A2, in particular, a request for a waiver of tuition under Policy 9.21, anticipated residence.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Litton. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, this should be fairly brief. We'll be back in about 5 to 10 minutes. Reconvene to our open meeting. Would someone please move to do so?
Move to reconvene to open
Thank
meeting.
you. Mr. Castillo, is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good. Opposed? No one's opposed. Okay, would someone please certify the closed meeting?
Whereas the Falls Church City School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Falls Church City School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. All those in favor? No, we're doing the roll call. Thank
Mr.
you.
Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Ms. Litton?
Aye.
Ms. Russell? And Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. I would seek unanimous consent to approve the consent agenda as presented. Great, thank you. Next, section 8.01, our SEE application review.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to, as she's walking up, Carly Aubrey, who has been our project manager for the West Falls Church site, along with her co-partner there, Robin, from Pian Hoffman, tonight is going to update the school board on the most recent site plan and the most recent approval that they're moving forward with. So I thought it was good for you all to hear this tonight and to make sure that you're in the loop. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Carly.
Okay. Good evening, school board. I want to give just a brief description of where we've been and where we're going, and then I'll turn it over to Robin to walk through the revised submittal and some of the key changes that have been made. Back in February is when the City Council referred the first submission out to boards and commissions and the school board. Since that time, we've received a lot of comments and have been in communications with Fairfax County. And so based on comments received from staff and boards and commissions, school board, and Fairfax County, we have the revised submission that you'll hear more about in a minute. So the current schedule for that is to, after tonight, have a board and commission targeted community meeting tomorrow night. Boards and commissions are the targeted audience, but it is a public meeting, so anybody is welcome to attend, and that'll be a detailed walkthrough of this plan. And then on Monday, June 17th, the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the City Council on the plan. And this City Council is scheduled to have a work session on July 1st, and then also an action hearing on July 8th. In addition to the SCE application, we're also bringing forth revised plats and land transfer documents because, as you'll see, the changes to the plan necessitated some changes to the lot lines. So those are occurring simultaneously as well. And the Planning Commission will take action on that revised plat Monday, and then the council will take action on the land transfer documents July 8th. So at this point, unless there's questions for me on any of that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Robin to walk through the plan.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Robin Betterell with Pian Hoffman, and thank you all for having us here tonight. So I will try to be relatively brief, as I know some folks in the room have already seen the new plan, but feel free to pause and ask questions at any time. So here's the overall new site plan. I'll just sort of walk through the changes, and if anyone has questions, you can let me know. So this new plan was sort of born of a number of comments that we received during the public comment period from various boards and commissions, including the school board, and as well as comments received from our neighbors in Fairfax County. It was, I think, one of those situations where a potential problem turned into an opportunity, and we actually feel like this new plan has some distinct advantages over the old plan and was able to really well respond to a lot of the comments and concerns that we heard from your body as well as the other boards and commissions. So the biggest change with respect to the school is that the shared parking garage, formerly located on the sort of I always get my directions confused on this, but the western portion of the site is now back to a surface parking lot. And that's the most significant change, I think, impacting the schools. The other big change is that we moved the senior housing building, which is slated and continues to be slated to be the tallest building on the site at somewhere between 12 and 15 stories. That was previously located on Block B, right there in the middle of the left side of the plan, and that has now been moved over to Block D at the sort of upper right corner of the plan, adjacent to the above grade garage there. So I think that's a big improvement as far as the schools, as getting that taller building as far away from the schools as we could manage in phase one. Another big change, or a couple more bigger changes, phase two is now broken up into two separate areas instead of all being in one zone. The office for phase two is now next to the phase one office, which we really like that change. It puts the office right on the prominent Route 7 location, along with making it next to the phase one office, which just kind of creates some nice synergy there. If there's a tenant that comes into phase one and wants to expand, they now have that opportunity to have more of a campus versus the way that the offices were split before. So we think this makes the phase two office more viable than the phase one office. And we also like the location on Route 7 better. And then the previous phase two location now only has the residential building there. The other big move was breaking up that sort of mega block. If you remember, on Block A, there was one very large rectangular shaped building, which was going to be the multifamily building. We've now broken that up into two smaller buildings, which we think just kind of makes for a better streetscape experience on Route 7. It also provided the opportunity to create, it's a word that I learned from Evan on this project, but a WNRF type environment that pretty much means it's a shared alley sort of situation where you'll have cars and pedestrians, and it's usually somewhat activated. We have a couple of examples at that down at our P.N. Hoffman development, the Wharf in downtown, which we'd love to schedule a time to tour folks through just to kind of get an idea for the work that we've done previously, and some ideas that you guys might take back and want to see employed here in some capacity. So I think all those changes are really improvements to the plan, and we're pretty happy overall with how this has turned out. The overall site plan with the prominent kind of main feature being the commons remains relatively unchanged from before. This is just kind of showing the phasing diagrams and the lot lines. This is the ground floor plane, so showing the retail portions of the site. This looks like the old, yeah, sorry.
So this one has previous to compare.
Right, this is a previous version of the ground floor, and then this is the new version of the ground floor. So a relatively similar amount of retail. We have now moved the grocer all the way to the corner of Haycock and 7, which is another kind of response to comments from the city of wanting that corner to be highly visible and highly active. This is the old plan, just showing the different colors for the different uses. Again, that salmon color building on Block B was the senior housing building that was slated to be that 12 to 15 stories. I know you'll see in the new plan that that's now moved. That salmon color building's now in the upper right-hand corner. We've moved the hotel to the center of the site. Being that that's going to share the space with the music venue, we feel like that's kind of the better place for it. Really activate the commons and kind of activate the center of the site. It's also a nice complement to the office use to have the hotel right next door to that. And then the Block C building, which was the hotel location, is now the micro apartment building. These are just showing the general phasing and program summaries. These numbers actually haven't changed. We were able to kind of push and pull at the actual boundaries of the site and able to fit all the same amount of program on the site as previous, which allowed us to keep the economics the same with the city, which I think was a big win for everybody. This is just showing a couple alternates. So there is a possibility that once we get into the actual design of the buildings, if we're not able to fit the full program for the hotel in that center location, we might have to move it back to its previous location, but we are making commitments as to the height and massing of that building, whether it is hotel or micro, in response to the school board's comments. The plan on the right-hand side shows the possibility of swapping the office and the residential components of Phase 2. If we needed to, for some reason, due to comments from whomever, go back to a completely straight square plan versus the bump out that we're showing on the left-hand side for the Phase 2 office. We could swap the Phase 2 office and residential uses and get the plan completely on the square. It would involve needing to move the senior back to its original location. So we're hoping that that's not a route that we have to take. But this is a axon just to show you generally the site, kind of bird's eye view at the Route 7 and Haycock corner. Another view from the bird's eye view from sort of the high school perspective, seeing the high school plaza there. This is that diagram showing, so this is a confusing diagram for a lot of folks. So the bottom number in those circles is showing the max density that we are allowing for via this SEE submission. And the top number is what we're currently showing and most probably will show at SESP as well. So the most interest to you is probably that building on Block C. And we'll go to the other diagram and you can kind of see where we've stepped that maximum massing down. Again, it's unlikely that we'll go over 7 stories period, but in the event that through the SESP process, we decide to build more height or change construction types from what's currently being proposed, we're saying we could go up to 10 stories in the middle there and 15 on the commons, but no more than 7 right up adjacent to the school plaza. These are some of the updated shadow studies reflecting these new proposed massings. I think overall it has improved quite a bit from what was previously shown, particularly as it relates to the school plaza. And so in the that middle diagram, I think is that lower middle diagram is kind of the most useful because it shows at what time of day in each season. And remember, these diagrams are showing the extreme of each season. So on either end of the extremes that you're seeing, it gets, better or worse, depending which way we're going in the seasons. But this middle low diagram shows the time that the sun comes off the buildings, which I think is just helpful to know. And this is all in the SEE submission package, which should be available for everyone to take a closer look at. This is kind of getting into parking a little bit. One thing I guess maybe to mention, I don't know if this is the diagram to mention it, but we have discussed with the schools during our committee meetings the possibility of returning to the plan of having that school drop-off kind of turnaround. It's sort of shown in black dotted lines on this plan. So right now, Street A sort of dead ends at the school parking lot, surface parking lot. We have talked to the schools about the potential of putting back in that parent drop-off and continuing Street A through to Mustang Alley as was originally shown. We're waiting sort of on Jennifer and her team from Gilbane to tell us whether they'd still be able to fit the same amount of parking in if we allowed that parking to extend into a partial portion of the Phase 2 office site. So we're sort of waiting on that study, and we'll have further conversations with the schools about that once we get that information. Sure.
Just a quick comment about that. I think that may be an important move for us to consider as we continue our conversations to put that turnaround, that's the black dotted line there, back into the plan. It's a little unclear of how many spaces that would remove from the overall 400, but as it stands now with the site circulation for parent drop-off and pickup, it would happen in that surface parking lot. And by putting a separated D sort of loop up at the top, it would keep that site circulation out of that parking lot. So there could be some real safety, some safety precautions by putting that in that would be resolved. So I'm telling you that now because as we continue our conversations, one of the things we've said all along is that we would end up with 400 parking spaces total, and that's what we're required to have by code. If, for example, that were to take up, say, 10 to 15 parking spaces, that overall number could drop to 385 or 390. And if that were to happen, we would have to file a waiver or submit a waiver and the like. But I think the trade-off might be something for us to consider. We don't have to make that decision today or in the next week, but I do want to put it on your radar that we're really paying attention to it, because the idea of doing kiss and ride inside that surface parking lot seems very complicated and complex as we sort of begin to map it out. So it may be better just to take it completely away.
These are all sections. I'm going to kind of speed through them because they remain relatively the same until we get to this one. This is that cycle track up on the sort of northern portion of Mustang Alley. The right side reflects what we had originally proposed, and the left side reflects what we're now proposing based on feedback, again, from schools and the school board, about making that extra safe. I think there was some concern that the bollards were not enough of a barrier for that cycle track and the roads. So now there's a full kind of tree pit planter box situation. We've widened the track and it's now more of a shared use path. So both cyclists and pedestrians would be expected to use that until which time that Virginia Tech does their development, and they're expected that they'll put a sidewalk along there. But until then, it would be a shared peds and bikes path. So we think this is another overall improvement to the plan, and came out of comments from the public. These are showing Street A. The reason there's two different sections now is if you look at the little plan, entering Street A from Haycock Road there, the street is at 50 feet wide, and that's largely to provide a turning lane into the garage for the future grocer, as well as the multifamily and condo building on that block. And then once you pass that alley entrance, it narrows to 40 feet. These are just images. I think another positive of this plan that we haven't talked about yet is there's a lot less of that above grade garage that's exposed now. So this is just, showing some placemaking for those exposed areas, but in general, it's a lot more shielded in this plan. And so I think maybe less of an eyesore. I know it was a big concern for everyone before. This is showing tree canopy, which we've been able to maintain fairly similar to the original submission. Just some close-ups of that landscaping, again, fairly unchanged from the original condition. Some more of the placemaking imagery for the commons. One other thing that we have done is narrowed the commons where it intersects with Route 7. That was for two reasons. One was to allow ourselves that sort of overhang on the office that you're seeing, that kind of triangle shape that's coming off the rectangle. That reflects the office building from the second story above. So what that does is provide a little bit of a covered outdoor seating area for a potential restaurant there. It also allowed us to get the square footage we needed out of the office in that same location. The other thing it sets up for is a potential future left turn out of the site, going east back towards the city. It's not currently contemplated in our plan due to some pushback from Fairfax County, but this configuration of the commons allows for that to be a possibility in the future. These are some more placemaking images for the commons, more about the trees. And this is showing the overall site and I guess how the parcel boundary has changed from the original. I think this starts to get into site civil drawings, which, while very important and lot of work goes into this, not usually what everyone wants to see in these public presentations. So if anyone has any questions, you can let me know.
Questions or comments from the board? Ms. Litton?
I just have one question, and maybe it was probably because I just didn't understand as we went along. I was thinking with the changes, that line on the left side went straight down, but it looks like it kind of bumps out with phase two. And so we still have all the same amount of parking we'd planned originally in that space, is that correct? Or we have less than the original
I think
plan?
the working plan is that during phase one, we would have the full trapezoid for parking. And then if phase two were to be executed, we would work with the economic development team to pick up any parking in that structure that would be in phase two that would offset the amount of loss that we would have from the trapezoid.
Gotcha, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my main question is still the height for the building, phase two, the office building is actually still slated to go as maximum 15 stories. 12 is what sort of the minimum is in there. And it's the building now that's closest to the school at that height. And I'm just trying to get the size because I wasn't able to figure out the distance between the west edge of that building and the middle school. I know we've got the whole parking lot and the road in between, so.
Karen's got her ruler out, so we'll tell you just now. It's
And
quite a ways, though.
The shadow study that's in the later pages makes it clear that even with that, the impact has been significantly reduced from some of the previous designs. But I'm just trying to make sure I've got that one tracked.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're estimating around 200 feet from that distance, so it's pretty significant.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from the board? All right. Thank you very much for coming out tonight and for the very comprehensive presentation.
And congrats on your groundbreaking on Friday.
Thank you. Next, 8.02, approval of 65% construction documents for the new George Mason High School.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to do a little bit more formal of reading of some business here because I just want to make sure I get this right because it is in policy 4.30, capital construction projects which cost more than $250,000 are included in the capital improvement plan, which has been approved by the school board. In addition, the school board reviewed and approved the architectural and engineering contracts, schematic and final building plans, and construction renewal contracts for all the projects included in the adopted CIP. The school board and the city council approved the CIP that included the high school project in 2018, and the school board approved the comprehensive agreement with Gilbane, Stantec, and Quinn Evans to build the high school on July 17th, 2019. The school board also approved the schematic designs that were presented on February 19th, and then following that schematic design, also approved the GMP1 on May of 2019. So tonight, the design team is now really focused on the completion of our construction drawings, and they are targeting the end of June for those construction drawings to be completed. These drawings will allow for the procurement of the remaining trades that will work on the construction of the high school. Construction team is starting the process of shop drawings, the meticulous preparation of material, specific details that allow for fabrication and installation of those materials on site. Site plan of the building permit approvals are ongoing and planned to support the on-site mobilization and groundbreaking scheduled for this Friday. So tonight, it's with pleasure that I welcome our team. Tonight we have Jen Max from Gilbane. We have, what is your name there? Bill Bradley from Stantec. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. And Daisy Brangman, our wonderful owner's representative tonight, who are going to share with you the construction drawings at 65%. I've asked them tonight to kind of talk through any changes, schedule, and the like, so that you can kind of see if they're the distinguishing pieces between the DD set and now the CD set. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen Max. Thank you, Jen, for being here.
Thank you for having us. It's exciting. It's amazing that we're almost at the end of the formal design completion, and we're also doing our groundbreaking this week. So we're all very excited to keep going and get ready for building this wonderful school. Bill is going to walk through the different changes, so highlighting at a high level just some of the changes that we've made since the design development phase, and then we'll walk you through some of the schedule things that'll be coming up this summer.
So please let the record reflect that I am not Dirk Jeffrey.
Oh, I know Dirk Jeffries.
You
and
know Dirk
You're
Jeffries.
no Dirk Jeffries.
Wherever he is, I'm sure he's watching, and I'm sure he appreciated that. Our gift to you. So I think we will be brief because the flurry of activity that you experienced during schematic and design development, insofar as changes, have settled considerably as we've moved into the construction document phase of this. So we're going to review site plan changes and changes to the floor plan. There aren't many, but we wanted to share them with you by way of update and as a matter of record. So let's begin with the site. On the site, really two things in particular. One, we had individual standards for pedestrian lighting along Mustang Way, and what we have now in lieu of that are lights along the athletic lighting poles, the poles that light the softball, baseball, tennis, and soccer fields. We're also required at this point to restripe the parking lot in front of Mary Ellen Henderson. And in so doing, we'll lose 7 parking spaces that will have to be accounted for in the trapezoid.
Can you explain why?
Well, they were originally striped per Fairfax County regulations, and the City of Falls Church would prefer that we do that per the City of Falls Church regulations.
Which are a little wider.
A little wider, which is good for door dings. A little deeper.
How much wider?
You tell us. Yeah.
It's going to be one of those nights.
So changes to floor plans. Again, nothing particularly substantive, but as a matter of record. We have added now lightning protection to the building, as well as first responder distributed antenna systems that will allow the first responders' cell phones to remain active when they're in the building. Help guarantee coverage of that. And then in several places throughout the building, we've hardwired audio speakers, and you see that indicated here in the dining room on the entry level. We also have that in the chorus rooms and band rooms in the music suite, as well as part of the learning stair on the 3rd floor. You'll also note on the 3rd floor as well as the 4th floor that we've reduced the number of lockers from 200 overall to 100 overall, so it'll be 50 per 3rd and 4th floor, and those lockers will have programmable day locks for students to check out as need be. In the auditorium, we've deleted the catwalk over the stage. We still have a catwalk over the auditorium, so there's still a catwalk in the auditorium, but there's not two. There's not one over the stage, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, that's not typical of a high school auditorium, for one. And two, it helps avoid conflicts with building systems and ductwork. The other thing that we've done on this library floor is to update the media video production suite. We did that for 2 reasons. One, to create an office for the FCC TV, as well as to create a larger editing booth. So you're looking here at the 4th floor, and on these next couple of slides, you'll see a couple things. Amendments to the layouts of 3 program areas, art, CTE, and science, and I'll just take those in turn. First, art. Initially, per the program, we had 2 2D art rooms and 2 3D art rooms. But in looking at your needs now and for the foreseeable future, It's better to have one 2D and one 3D and leave the other two spaces available for flex as program changes in the future. So you might have digital photography, for instance. We didn't want to outfit those rooms so specifically for 2D art that they wouldn't be available for 3D photography. With the science classrooms, which you know are on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors, initially they were, per the program, very systems heavy, which limited their flexibility. So we tried to define them in terms of high intensity, medium intensity, and low intensity. And the difference is really in the infrastructure, the building systems that accompany each. And so we have 4 high intensity labs with hoods. We have 4 medium intensity labs and 3 low intensity labs. 2? 2, my apologies. 4, 4, and 2 equals 10. And thank you. And so they provide some flexibility over time as the programs change. One other thing that you'll see bulleted here before I go to CTE is the amended floor schedule. Initially, we had polished concrete throughout. The lightweight concrete that is used on the upper floors beyond the gymnasium and the ground floor doesn't do well with being polished, and so we've gone to a luxury vinyl tile above the gym and the entry-level floor. Looking at the CTE suite here, 2 changes to that. In the flex CTE labs that you see on the northern side up top, we've added casework, sinks, and also flexible snorkels for on-site ventilation. Looking below, the CTE shop, the lab there that you see is larger now. When we looked at the equipment schedule, the amount of equipment that the teachers wanted to bring over and also add to that, we realized that the space as programmed wasn't large enough. And so we right-sized that room, but it came at the cost of 1 CTE classroom. And that was a discussion that we had with the CTE teachers, and they preferred the larger fab studio with the equipment in it. And then the last thing is that throughout the building, we've right-sized the number of toilets and showers. And you see that reflected here in the ground level, whereas before we had 6 individual toilets and showers in that area that's designated by the rectangle. We now have 4, and so that space was given back over to offices. Reduced some of the numbers of showers and toilets in some of the other spaces throughout the building as well. So collectively, you see this list. Changes haven't been substantive, but they are noted, and there were some savings as well as some additional costs to get the building to this point. The last thing I'll add is that in the last bit, we've been working with your ASCC to look at the interiors of the building, and this is an image that you may or may not have seen to this point, but this is the entry hall, so the entrance to the building is behind me. You go down the stairs in front of you to the left to get to the gym level. You go up the stairs to the right to get up to the library, and you see the studio, or not the studio, the cafe, top left there in the image. So the auditorium is to your right, and the admin suite is to your left, and you see the legacy wall there on your left as well. And that's it for substantive changes to the plans, site, and floor. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those. If not, I'll hand it to Jennifer for the schedule.
Yes, Mr. Castillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we visited the remodeled TJ, gosh, 2 years ago, one of the things they said was that lockers are basically a thing of the past. They had basically, sort of open cubbies. What's the thinking on that?
So we got specific feedback that there was a need to have a certain amount of academic lockers. For example, students that participate in swim team off-site usually bring their swim gear to school and then head directly to practice after. So we wanted to provide a space for those students that bring a heavier load that maybe aren't participating specifically in a team sport that would have access to a team locker room, so they'll have a place to do that. The way that area has been designed, though, it's very flexible. So if in the future you determine you don't want the lockers at all, it won't have any impact to the overall architecture to remove them. But that was the other change why we switched those to Digilock, so that it's not an assigned locker. It's more of like a day use, like somebody came with stuff and they have a project and they need a place to store it specifically for that day.
I would just add to that, and I think Jen sort of hit it, but we also did a number of surveys of the students at George Mason and got some feedback from them specifically, which then sort of drove the feedback to the Gilbane team. When we did, and our first survey was of about 100, and the end size was about 150 high school students, and asked them how they used their lockers and when and the like, and only 2 of 150 students actually used their lockers at all on a permanent basis. So it sort of speaks to your what you observed at TJ, but then we did get the feedback. It would be nice to be able to put some things, and so having the 50 dispersed across 2 floors allows us then to have some space.
Other questions? Okay, Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question about the catwalk in the auditorium. Is that going to have any impact in the function for the actual use of the stage and being able to put on performances? Is it going to have any impact on the program itself?
As far as we can tell, no, it won't have any impact. In fact, because it's going to be aligned to other theaters in the region, with respect to catwalks, we'll be able to do what everybody else is doing, but we were able to incorporate into the final cost of the building those projection systems as well. So we'll have a combination of both a projection system and a catwalk to be able to do some things over the house. Most stages don't have a catwalk over the stage, and so that was the one that was eliminated.
Ms. Russell? Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to tack onto that, do any of you know what the rationale was for including the 2 catwalks to begin with in the initial design? So I understand the rationale for taking it out, but I'm just curious what feedback we got that precipitated having 2 to begin with.
So, I mean, part of the theater design also involves not looking at just the catwalks, but also looking at all the overhead rigging that's being provided in the space. So we don't know exactly what the rationale was behind the educational specification. We ask ourselves that a lot on different things within that document. But we are providing, for example, one of the main reasons to have a catwalk over the stage is to allow for flexibility for adjustments of lights. Over the stage, we have an electrical batten, which means that one of the rails, if you look up over the stage, is actually motorized. So the staff or students will be able to drop that to the stage, make whatever adjustments they need to do to the lighting, and then raise that back. And then we're also looking at lights that will also have some remote control function so that you can do final adjustments when it's in the air. That helps negate part of the need for a catwalk when you're able to do those last minute adjustments. The only other conversation we had was, in the event that you want to do a show where you're dropping snow, for example, that's the benefit of having something like a catwalk system. The challenge with it, though, the auditorium has a very significant smoke evacuation system, and there's so much large ductwork in that space, we kept running into challenges actually being able to maintain that catwalk, which is why we went back and said, is there a different way that we can adjust the design of the stage, still give the functionality for the department, but allow us to actually make the building systems work?
We did speak extensively to Mr. Northrup about this, and he's aware and fine with the changes, specifically because of the electrical batten that drops and then the fine motor changes with the remote controls as well. And then that in combination with the extensive projection system, he's going to have a really state-of-the-art system.
Yes, Mr. Webb.
I have a quick question about the last photo that you had of the lobby-way coming into George Mason. Is that an envision of the actual interior, what it's going to possibly look like? And I'm thinking more the wall to the right with the picture and whatever there.
We've actually had a lot of conversation about this, and in the most recent iteration, there is not a picture. There's George Mason High School in the bold letters, and that's it for that wall. And we'll outfit it as we move forward with community input.
Thank you very much.
Anything else? not, we'll continue.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. We've prepared a couple things regarding schedules. So you've seen this graphic before from us, so just wanted to show you. Our red line just keeps moving to the right, so we're imminently ready to start building the new school. So groundbreaking on Friday, and we will have full mobilization on Monday. So we, in the Sunday series this weekend, we outlined what this summer looks like, both from our construction activities as well as the coordination that we'll be doing with Park and Recs for both the camp servicing, the 4th of July fireworks celebration, as well as the summer school program that will continue to proceed at George Mason. So over the summer, lots of excavation, putting up the fencing around the site, getting ready to dig the hole. It takes about 2 weeks for us to it'll look like not lots is going on that first 2 weeks. There's code required things that we have to do to establish the perimeter of the site so that we can actually start pulling out dirt. So you'll start seeing trailers showing up next week. So hopefully very exciting. And then lots of dirt coming out over the summer. Steel should start being stood up this fall. So around the September timeframe is when you'll start to actually see us come out of the hole. So this is the overall schedule, the same as what we've looked at before. And then did also want to highlight what happens over the summer in terms of our next approvals. So as was mentioned, we're in the final reviews and approvals for the construction documents. At the same time, we are in for all of our building permit approvals. So as everyone's aware, we received Phase 1A approval for site plan approval, which allows us to start all our mobilization activities and stay in the ground. To come out of the ground, we need that Phase 1B approval, and we are on track to receive that mid-July. We're finishing the documents right now, and we've had some good dialogue with the city to finalize the open issues that we had at the conclusion of Phase 1A. Phase 2 is focused on the trapezoid. So as you heard in the previous presentation, we are doing we've been doing some test fits of the trapezoid to determine how that space would actually lay out. How might it look with that different turnaround space for parent drop-off, and also looking at the implications of the Phase 1 versus Phase 2 with the developer. So our goal is to wrap up through the summer basically the study of what that trapezoid will be so that we can finalize those documents and go back in for approval this fall for that remaining phase. On the building permit side, our team is actually today and tomorrow is working on pulling together all the final documents to resubmit for building permit approval. So we received all our comments, we've responded to them, and now we're going back in with the resubmission so that we can receive the approval for the building permit. So that takes us through permits, and then our next big activity this summer. Oh, please.
Just a quick question about the trapezoid. I mean, it seems to me, well, I don't know, but we'd have some flexibility to figure out what reality looks like and then adjust, right? And it's not, is it going to be the case that we know what the right configuration is the first time out of the gate, or would there be some chance to say, hey, let's try this? And because it's not as if there's a bunch of immovable stuff there where you couldn't learn from experience, or am I thinking unrealistically about how hard this is?
So the geometry is pretty limited on what we can actually accomplish in the space. So our site team has already done several test fits for the trapezoid without taking into consideration what the development impact might be from that Phase 2 carve out or with the turnaround loop. What we've done is done a study of the trapezoid to figure out the absolute number of maximum spaces that we can fit within the trapezoid to ensure that we get to the 400. As Bill had mentioned, part of that challenge with that trapezoid, originally it was focused on 187 spaces. We've now needed to add an additional 7 spaces that were lost from the restriping due to the Mary Ellen Henderson lot. So now the 187 plus the 7 is extremely tight. We're exactly there with some very creative spaces to make that trapezoid fit to get to the 400. So now we have the test fit that makes it work. And so now it's the what else do we do in terms of integration with the development neighbor. So there's not 20 different solutions of how we could implement that trapezoid. So I think will be concluded pretty quickly.
If I could add to that, the other kind of challenge that we have ahead of us is also making sure that Gilbane is able to finish that trapezoid. Right now, the schedule is for Gilbane to finish that trapezoid by August 2021, so that it's ready for the school year of fall 2021, so that is your first school year where you have a 100% fully complete site. We have some flexibility in the next few weeks, as they continue to kind of play a little bit with the geometry and the fit of the trapezoid. But in order to meet that August 2021 schedule, we have to submit for site plan review in the fall so that they then have time to buy out their packages as well.
So on to our final GMP. So we, between the design team and the building team, have a handoff of drawings that happen between us on June 21st. So that's next Friday. We will be out on the market probably 4 days later. So we're very eager to get the design documents out. So our on-site construction team is currently working on work scopes for all the remaining work that we'll be buying. We had reviewed at our last meeting, this is the work trades that are really focused on the exterior of the building, so masonry, windows, roofing, and then inside the building, all the interior trades. So it'll be purchasing the rest of the mechanical and electrical systems for the building, as well as all the drywall, painting, flooring, all those finished trades, as well as all the specialty systems. So the theater system, the food service equipment, all the athletic fields will also get purchased in this last package. So we will be on the street for about 3 weeks. We are getting a lot of feedback. The market is extremely busy right now. Actually, I had another project that had bids due this week, and we're having a lot of difficulty with coverage. So we're probably going to look at trying to expand the amount of time that we're on the market just to allow us to maximize the amount of bids that we receive. So we're already notifying bidders that this project is coming. Everybody's interested. It's just unfortunately a very busy time for the marketplace right now for bidding activity. Once we get our bids in, we have a couple weeks to do our analysis internally, as well as prepare our GMP documents that we'll prepare to and send to you. So I believe on August 5th is the day that you'll receive the full packet of our GMP. So similar to the process last time where we'll submit for review, have discussions, negotiations. There are 2 school board meetings planned for the review. So the 8/13 meeting, the 8/13 meeting is where you'll have first review of the GMP, be able to ask any questions either of us or of the UNA representative team. The negotiations will be ongoing at that point, and then we'll be seeking final approval at the 8/22 meeting. And then at that point, executing within the following week. And then that will release the rest of our trades to start procuring all our materials.
Just as a reminder to the board, that 8/22 meeting is a special meeting for this purpose. So if you'd get it on your calendar now, that'd be great. It's a Thursday night.
Any questions that we can answer? Schedule, design, otherwise?
All right, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our partner on the general government side, Wyatt Shields, who's here tonight. Thank you, Wyatt, for your support in helping us move through the permitting process and helping us move this project along. So.
All right, well, thank you very much. And thank you for Mr. Shields for coming out tonight. Next on the agenda, 8.03, our textbook adoption. Thank you for your patience.
So I'd like to welcome up Eric Duche.
Oh, wait, we need to approve.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry.
Sorry, let's go back. Wait, we need to approve, school board, we need to, yeah, you can come on up. Sorry, we need to approve the final building plan. Would someone please move to approve the final building plans for the high school?
Madam Chair, move the school board approve the final building plan for the new George Mason High School as presented by Gil Bain, Stan Tech, and Quinn Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Ms. Liddon. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. Great. And now we'll move on to our textbook adoption.
All right. Again, I'd like to welcome Eric Duche from George Mason High School and Jeannie Seabridge from Central Office, who have been working diligently over the past several months on textbook adoption, specifically for social studies. This evening when you came in, hopefully you had a chance to see some of the books that are out here. These are for you to sort of look, feel, and touch if you're so inclined. But they do have a presentation that they'd like to share with you tonight. Textbook adoption obviously is something that's really important to us in the school division, but it's not nearly as important as it once was. And I'll sort of just set the stage and hopefully not steal too much of your thunder. But the reason that it's not as important as it has been in the past is that The textbook isn't the curriculum. It's not what we follow. We don't go chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5. Instead, these textbooks serve as a resource for our kids and are supplementary in many ways to the multitude of resources that are out there. Jeannie will talk a little bit tonight, I think, about our relationship with the Library of Congress and primary source documents and the like. So while it's important that we do this textbook adoption, times are changing, and these are more materials and resources than they are actually textbooks. So, Madam Chair, if it's all right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Duché and Ms. Seabridge.
Thank you, Dr. Noonan. So yes, we are here to ask your approval on adopting these textbooks. The textbook process was followed based on the school board policy. We had a textbook committee that was formed for all of our levels from elementary, middle school, and high school. You'll notice in the packet or the plan that was given to you, you might have looked at the committee members section and noticed that it was somewhat short for elementary and middle. The one reason being, like Dr. Noonan mentioned, was that things are changing. We don't have textbooks as much in some of the areas as we used to. One of the reasons being that with our IB program, with PYP and MYP, we feel that there's a lot of supplemental materials that are out there that are really good materials that are being updated all the time because a lot of those resources are online. The teachers feel that they have some of the things that they already need. The Library of Congress is a huge resource for our teachers. We have a lot of teachers that have done training on how to use those primary sources in history, which are wonderful to have available to them. So the decision, after some conversation with our collaborative teacher leaders at the elementary level and at the middle school level, was to just hold off on adopting formal textbooks and to really look more at some supplemental materials that they'd like to enhance the teaching and learning that's going on with the PYP and the MYP at the moment. So that's why there isn't a very large committee there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric Duché. He is our collaborative teacher leader at George Mason High School for the history department. He has been very instrumental in leading this process, which started back in October of 2018. So the process went from working with vendors and presentations and piloting materials and really testing it in the classroom. And then there was a division rubric that was filled out that the teachers all had input on to make their final selection. So, Mr. Duché.
Thank you. So to piggyback up what Dr. Noonan said, there's very few social studies teachers, at least anymore, that teach it where you're reading chapter 1 and you talk about chapter 1, and then you read chapter 2 and you talk about chapter 2. What all of these are going to be used for is tools and resources to provide reading and other resources for the kids during the year. Another great thing about these resources is they all have really good online sources and tools that go along with them that come along with the purchase price. So those are two big benefits. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process we went through and the rubrics we used. So just to assess these textbooks, we met in our CTs, and we used the rubrics provided by Jeannie that I think you have access to, right? Have you?
Mm-hmm. It's in the plan.
Okay. So the three topics we assessed were instructional design and materials, professional learning and support, and alignment with the FCCPS profile of a graduate and the IB standards. The instructional design and material criteria looked mostly at how well the book is set up in terms of content, including both the physical textbook and the digital resources. All the texts we assessed were approved by the state, so they generally met the overall requirements, but the texts we chose were better suited for our students and had some aspects that stood out from the crowd. The second criterion we looked at was professional support. These texts provide multiple styles of professional development, including everything from pre-recorded webinars to in-person professional development sessions. And then finally, we assessed these texts on how well they meet the FCCPS profile of a graduate and the IB standards. All of these texts do a good job of allowing for student choice, applying content to real-world scenarios, and providing opportunities to work collaboratively. So we chose, for the USVA and the World History 2, or the big blue one and the big orange one over there. And they're both by the same publisher. These are the teacher editions. And they have two pieces that we really liked. The readability for both of these are really good, and the online offerings are excellent. So they have a program that's really exciting because it's a smart growth technology where the students can do assessments, and as they do the assessments, the program like learns their ability and adjusts future assessments accordingly. So that's those two. For the government textbook is the big blue one in the middle. That's the Magruder text. This was a tough choice because all the government textbooks we looked at were really good. The one that pushed this one over the edge is the fact that this one has a very specific focus on Virginia. There's a chapter in there that focuses specifically on Virginia government, and we thought that was important because that wasn't in any other text. But most of them just covered a basic level of local government, whereas this one was specific to Virginia. The AP government textbook is this white one here in the front. It's called by Scott Abernathy and Karen Wapples. This one is important because the AP government text or curriculum has just been updated, and when they did, they changed the way things flow. And so the way it works is now that public policy flows through every and is weaved into every unit, and this book does that really well. The other textbooks didn't really update so much as just revise the way they did it previously. So this is the most up-to-date version for the IB book. The IP, or the IB psychology book, is that one in the front right there. The reason we chose that one is because it has the best case studies and the most up-to-date, and that's really what our teacher uses those mostly for. Most of his classes, they look at case studies and then they discuss them and debate them and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we chose the Global Politics book, which is the far one over there by Palgrave. This book, of all the ones we looked at, did the best job at focusing on international relations, whereas all the other ones we looked at kind of just glossed over that. And that's a really big part of what they're looking to do in that course. So I think these are all excellent books, along with the resources that go along with them, and I hope that they will be approved.
And just so you know, all the books were on display at the high school for about 4 weeks, and we did send out in morning announcements a survey asking for public comment, and to this date, I just checked before the meeting, we had none. So.
Great, any questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Castillo?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So how long are we going to be using these books?
The state adoption cycle is 7 years, so we've aligned our adoption process to match the state. So it'll be a 7-year process before we look at them again. But then we have supplemental materials that we'll use as time changes and history changes as well.
And do the software offerings update, or are they fairly static? And does that kind of help fill some gaps?
Most of the vendors told us that they update it regularly, daily, and just stay with the times. They enhance it, so they do keep current.
And is there a separate license fee for those
It
software
is
services?
part of the textbook, so when you buy the textbook, the license comes with it.
Okay, thanks.
I think you raise a really good question, and it's one that I think we've actually seen happen during the 7-year cycle, specifically in social studies. When Yugoslavia goes away, it's nice to be able to update the materials, and we've seen that. That's a bad example because it happened before online textbooks, but you get the idea. There have been a number of times where there have been mistakes in books, or there have been books that have been culturally insensitive. And those have been updated very quickly by the publishers, and they're able to push that out very quickly. So it's a good option.
Mm-hmm.
I just have one kind of big picture question. I mean, 7 years from now, do you think we'll still be adopting textbooks? Or we'll be adopting online tools? I'm just kind of curious. You know, it seems more and more that my kids' textbooks sit in their room and I'm not sure they ever open them. So what do you sort of see as long-term on that?
I don't know that we'll need like a textbook for every kid, but kids learn differently, and some like to have a hard copy to read. Some know they get distracted if they're reading on their computer or on their phone because texts come up and Instagram posts come up and they get off. So I think eventually, we could probably get away from having full sets of textbooks, maybe just class sets or something to that extent, but I think there'll always be a place for some hard copy, just because for differentiation purposes.
And it's definitely changed. I know when I started here in 2004, I actually taught social studies and civics, and we purchased 2 textbooks per kid almost. One went home and stayed home, and then there was a class set that stayed in school. Now we're at the point where we get a class set that doesn't always go home, and we're not even adopting anymore at the middle school level very often because we have so many digital resources. But, you know, like Mr. Duche said, it's some kids do need that tactile, that book, that sometimes the digital isn't exactly what they need for their learning style. So they'll probably always be around, but I think that there's going to be less of it.
I was just going to say that from a student perspective, I think that history is the class that I see textbooks lasting the longest in that, and I think that a lot of my friends can echo this, in that that is the only class I used a textbook for in this year, and because it's just really nice when you're reading a lot of history facts to be able to look at it on a paper and not get just zoned out staring at your computer all the time.
Can we formally let the record reflect that the National Merit finalist has said out loud that the only textbook she had this year was in social studies? I think it's an important moment just in terms of resources and how students access information to sort of consider as we move forward, to your point.
Anything else from the board? Okay. If not, would someone please move to approve the textbooks?
Madam Chair, I move the school board approve the selected history and social sciences textbooks for George Mason High School as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you very much. Thanks for your hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, the first reading of policies. Ms. Minson.
Good evening. Jeannie is graciously staying as we present the first 3 policies for first reading that relate to textbook selection. In looking at the textbooks that were going to be selected by the board, the committee did use our current policies 6.17, regulation 6.17, and then for discarding books and materials, that there's a separate regulation 6.17.1. In looking at the model policies and what the textbook and instructional material policies were, they're structured a bit differently. Rather than having a policy that covers both textbook and instructional material, and then a regulation that gives more details about specifically textbooks and instructional material, it's broken down under the model policies into policy IIAA, which is textbook selection, adoption, and purchase, a separate policy IIA on instructional materials, and then policy IIAB on supplementary materials, selection and adoption. And after going through these in detail with Ms. Seabridge, thank you for your time and walking me through what the process currently looks like. We feel confident that the model policies at IIAA, IIA, and IIAB aren't going to change much of what we do. In many ways, they're a little bit more consistent with what the practice is now, which is the Board of Education gives a list of approved textbooks, and then the committee is formed and looks over those. I also think it's worth noting that our previous policies on this were last revised in 2008 for the policy, and 2001 for the regulation. So going to the model policies will get us more in line with, frankly, what we have been doing. I don't have a line-by-line comparison of these 2 policies because they are structured a little bit differently, but looking first at the policy IIAA, textbook selection, adoption, and purchase. Any questions by the board on that policy? All right. The next policy relating to textbooks is IIA, instructional materials. This is a little bit more brief than our current policy, recognizing that instructional materials are different than textbooks. And this looks to the superintendent or his or her designee to create, update, and the guidelines and procedures for selection of instructional materials, which is what we currently do and what Ms. Seabridge was presenting to the board today. Any questions on policy IIA, instructional materials?
Wouldn't be a policy night if I didn't ask a question.
Absolutely.
Ms. Newsom, on line 11, it's just a grammatical thing. I think we
Yes.
might want to insert a to before provide, because if we don't, the materials will be selected and provide an opportunity to participate in their own selection.
So are selected to provide?
Are selected and to provide.
Selected and to provide. Thank you.
These are some pretty awesome materials.
Those materials are very gifted. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Anything else on policy IIA? All right. Policy IIAB, supplementary material selection and adoption. This policy would be the school board delegating responsibility for selection of supplemental materials to the individual schools, which is consistent with what we currently do. Any questions on IIAB? Hearing none. The next three policies all relate to personnel. The first, GCQA, non-school employment by staff members. This policy was specifically referenced in a footnote to the FMLA policy, which is up for second reading, where the VSBA advised that if under the Family Medical Leave Act policy, the school board was going to require individuals on FMLA not to have non-school employment, the board would need to have a similar policy relating to non-school employment by staff members. We currently do have a policy 8.58 that looks a little bit different in structure to the model policy GCQA, but insofar as it allows employees to engage in non-school employment as long as it doesn't detract or interfere with their employment at Falls Church City School Board. It's consistent with previous policy 8.58, which is another one that's pretty outdated. It was last adopted or last revised in 2011. It also says that if a employee is on leave from the school board employment, whether in paid or unpaid status, they have to receive prior written authorization from the Director of Human Resources. And it makes clear that the school board doesn't endorse, support, or assume liability for any activity conducted by a school board employee outside the scope of their employment. Any questions on GCQA, non-school employment by staff members? All right, hearing none. Policy GCBD, staff leaves and absences. Amy Hall and I have spent hours going through our leave policies. We have about 13 regulations related to leave, and many of those we're going to be able to wrap up and continue as regulations, but not have as many details. And I think it's going to make it much more clear for staff on what types of leave we have, particularly making sure that the regulations will align with the current leaves that our 12-month employees and our 10-month employees have. So this GCBD, staff leaves and absences, is very straightforward. 2 sentences talking about the leaves and absences are subject to school division policy and regulations, and that it's up to the superintendent to establish the necessary regulations. In that regard, it's similar to policy 8.78, but we don't think that it's necessary to include what those specific regulations are within this policy, which is what 8.78 does now. Any questions on policy GCBD? Hearing none, the final personnel policy for tonight is GCBEA, leave without pay. It is worth pointing out that this policy only applies to employees in their first year of employment. This covers the gap year when FMLA would not be permitted under federal law because an individual has not been employed for 12 months. So the standard is somebody who otherwise would be eligible for FMLA because they work the 1250 hours a year, but they have not been employed for 12 months can apply for leave without pay. The approval must be obtained prior to the leave being taken. The rights under this policy, GCBEA, do expire after the employee's first year, and it does make clear, starting at line 27, that employees who are on unpaid leave under this policy cannot be employed in another capacity unless they receive advance written approval of the superintendent. It's the amount of leave here for a debilitating or life-threatening illness is up to 30 days. That's not mandated by state statute or code, but that was what the VSBA recommended. And Dr. Noonan, I thought that was reasonable, given this would be a first-year employee who is experiencing their own life-threatening illness or injury or debilitating injury. I also do want to point out that this policy does nothing to impact other leaves that we have, other available through our regulations right now. And the corresponding policy for this, or what this policy would be replacing, is actually a current regulation 8.78.14, leave without pay, which, going through that, there's many elements of leave without pay that right now make Ms. Hall's life more difficult. There's certain meetings that have to be had if employees take leave without pay that before it's approved in advance, and then follow-up meetings with supervisors that need to take place. So we think by moving to this policy, it makes it clear that employees can't have leave without pay without it being approved in advance. So we do think that that's going to help, and that's something that we're going to make sure that we message to staff and staff is aware of in advance. So that would be a change in practice, but we do think that it's something that we can message out appropriately and make sure that everybody understands and can follow. Questions on GCBEA, leave without pay? Hearing none. The last two, too speedy.
So this is only for the employee's condition, right? It's not a family member's condition?
That's right. As it reads, it's only granted to employees of the school who have a debilitating or life-threatening illness or injury and are not eligible for FMLA. It doesn't say anything about caring for a family member who would have a life-threatening illness or injury.
Yeah, because I thought FMLA is for not you.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess kind of,
FMLA could be for you
For
or
you
for
as well.
someone else.
Okay.
This policy is limited to the employee's debilitating or life-threatening illness or injury.
okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
So just to clarify that this is only for that first gap year, just out of curiosity, do we have a separate policy for those individuals who've already exhausted their FMLA and would need a leave without pay for some reason? Or how, I guess I'm just curious if there's another policy and that would cover that situation. Because I could see like a situation where someone might be caring for like a parent for the 12 weeks of the FMLA and burn through that, and then they're not eligible for another year, but then have their own life-threatening.
Right now, we have a leave of absence under our current regulations, and I don't anticipate that that would be changed much, but I think we're going to be looking at what it's called and what it's limited to. And I think one of the most important pieces that I'm working on with Ms. Hall is making sure that we have advance notice of those leaves so that when these situations are coming up, we know in advance that this is anticipated or there's a concern that has been brought to our attention by employees, recognizing that there can be extenuating circumstances, but hoping that it can be arranged in much time in advance to get substitutes online and making sure that folks know what's going on and there can be support provided for the staff member as well. Anything else on GCBEA? Okay, the last two policies for first reading are policies that were recently adopted, or fairly recently adopted by the board, and part of the VSBA policy services is they review all policies every 5 years and when there are changes in the law. So I do anticipate that at future board meetings, when we're bringing policies that have been revised by the VSBA and they're not substantive changes, that I would recommend waiving first reading and going straight to second reading and adoption. These two policies, however, do have some substantive changes that I thought were worth bringing up and noting. The first is FEG, construction planning. This was last adopted by the board in June of last year, so a year and a day ago. And you can see I put in red that the structure was changed to the policy to make it bullet format and to add that in construction planning, the plans have been reviewed by an individual or entity with professional expertise in building security and crime prevention through building design. That's not anything different from what we've been doing, but now it is a requirement under the Virginia Code, so we wanted to go ahead and add it in here. It also requires that the superintendent's approval, architects and engineer statements, and all of the comments of reviewers are submitted to the superintendent of public instruction. So that's an additional change that will make sure that after this policy is adopted by the board, we share with Sevi and with Daisy Brangman and others who are assisting us in the construction planning. Any questions on FEG?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the red bullet is also required by code?
The
By
red
Virginia
bullet.
code?
Yes. There were revisions to 22.1140 in the most recent legislative session.
All right, thanks.
I think one of the things that Ms. Benson suggested about some of these, there are going to be updates on these all the time. And so one thing you, as was mentioned, you may want to consider waiving first reading, move right to second reading unless there's some reason not to. But wanted to reiterate that.
And the last policy is GA, Personnel Policies Goals. This was initially adopted by the board in April of 2017, so it's 2 years ago. The initial policy was just that first sentence talking about the goal of the employment policies and practices of Falls Church City School Board. Now, lines 8 through 30 have been added to specifically clarify that the school board really can't pass the trash to another school board if they are aware of, if they know or have probable cause to believe that the employee, contractor, or agent engaged in sexual misconduct regarding a minor in violation of the law. There are specific carve-outs to that if an individual has, for example, the matter's been officially closed by the prosecutor or police, the employee who was otherwise charged has been exonerated, or the investigation remains open within 4 years of the date the information was reported to law enforcement. I can assure you that this is something we're already doing, but due to changes in both the United States Code and in the Virginia Code, as seen in the legal references at the bottom of the page, is a required part of the policies, and I think is what we should be doing. It is what we are doing, and I think the policy reflecting that is important. And as Dr. Noonan said, while this is a major substantive change, an addition of 30-some-odd lines to a policy, I don't think it changes anything we do, and I think it'd be fine if the board wanted to waive first reading of both FEG and GA and go straight to second reading and adoption. I don't see any reason not to do that at this point, unless you had major questions or concerns with the language in either of these policies.
I just have one suggestion in line 9,
Mhm.
that it be, I would say, a current or former.
No employee,
Because if somebody
contractor, or agent.
leaves, and you know that, you'd still want policy to extend those
Mhm.
steps.
Someone could argue that if they've left, they're not a school board employee without that additional clarification.
Mhm.
Line 8.
Line 9, I believe.
So it would then read, current or former. No employee, contractor, or agent of the Falls Church City School Board may assist a current or former school board employee, contractor, or agent in obtaining a new job. Is that what you're saying? I think that would be fine, because we wouldn't have control over whether they were a current or former employee, but we would have control over our current employees, contractors, and agents. So it would be us directing those over whom we do exercise control by virtue of our employment that they can't talk about or give references or assist someone who's currently with us or someone who has left. I think that's a fine addition if you all agree. Okay. So on that one, if it is going, waiving first reading, going to second reading and adoption, it would just be moved for adoption as amended. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a different question on lines, I guess it's on 11 and 14.
Mhm.
And I know it's in the code, because I looked at that, and I know it's in USC 7926, I looked at that. Probable cause is kind of a legal imposition. Do we have people, are our employees trained to know whether they have probable cause to make a determination like that?
Are you asking me if the legislature got it right by including that language? Or
I'm wondering if that's, if having that in there is something that there's absolutely zero flexibility about, or if we have some definition that can explain it. I'm just thinking about somebody saying, I don't know.
If I could pile on. I mean, to
yes,
me-
absolutely.
To me, probable cause, and I was thinking that same thing, that probable cause is basically a charging or, a warrant. You issue a warrant if there's probable cause. I'm not sure what probable cause means for a school division.
Right. I think the challenge is that's the exact language from 20 USC 7926. I mean, look at the Virginia code too.
It's the same. I'm looking at it.
It is.
Well, just because it's code doesn't mean that we can't get some definition around it. So I wonder
Right.
if perhaps we don't waive first reading on this and we talk to Elizabeth Ewing and see if she can give some guidance on how to further define or interpret probable cause. Because I think you're right. I think it is a legal charging term that
And I wonder if,
we need some
It
clarity.
should just be knows or
Is aware of,
reasonably
yeah.
should know.
and it could be that earlier in the code section, that's a defined term, which would actually help.
Or put it in language that school people understand, which is reasonable suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'd even say, a good faith reason to believe, or something. There are 20 other ways to say this that don't.
Right.
Yeah.
cause
That
these
don't use the
problems.
term, yeah. Why don't we take that back and see if we can get some
Sure.
clarity around that?
Sure. Anything else on policy GA?
I think that's enough.
Okay. All right, so I think we're going to first reading for everything except policy FEG. Yeah, that's
be fine.
the will of the board. And if so, would someone please make that motion?
I move that the school board approve first reading of the policies IIAA textbook selection, adoption, and purchase, IIA instruction materials, IIAB supplementary materials selection and adoption, GCQA non-school employment by staff members, GCBD staff leave and absences, GCBEA leave without pay, sorry, which one am I skipping?
Skip that one.
Okay, skip FEG. And GA, personnel policy goals. And then you want me to move?
Waive first reading.
And I further move we waive first reading of FEG construction planning and move to
Second reading and adoption.
second reading and adoption. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Great. Okay, we'll move on to 8.05, second reading and adoption of policies.
There's only one policy for second reading, that's policy GCBE, family and medical leave. And there was one change, adding a comma on page 6. Otherwise, this was well received and there were no questions from the board. And Ms. Hall and Ms. Michael did share this policy with Seek and Peak, and there were no real issues or concerns raised either. So, welcome questions if there are any on family and medical leave policy GCBE.
All right. Seeing none, would someone move to approve second reading adoption of policy GCBE?
I move that the school board approve second reading and adoption of policy GCBE, family and medical leave.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained? Move on to 8.06, the approval to dispose of assets. Ms. Michaels.
Thank you so much. I'm coming to the school board this evening requesting your approval to dispose of a bus through an online auction. This is a 2000 Safety Liner bus that the school board had previously allowed us to replace, but we hung on to the bus and kept it as a spare. Now, based on repairs that are needed, it's no longer feasible for us to maintain this bus. It was truly just an additional spare that we have, so we're requesting your approval to auction it off through Colonial Auction, who we've used previously to auction off unused buses.
Any questions? Anyone like to buy a bus?
Partridge Family.
Bus available. If not, would someone move to authorize the superintendent to dispose of a bus?
I move that the Falls Church Public School Board authorize the superintendent to dispose of a bus through an online auction process, with the proceeds being recognized as miscellaneous revenue in the school operating fund.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? None. 8.07, approval of milk and meal prices. Ms. Michael.
Thank you so much. After looking at our food and labor costs that we're projecting for next school year, we're coming to the board recommending that we increase lunch prices for 2020. We'd like to maintain milk prices the same as well as breakfast prices the same for next school year. When you look at the prices that we're proposing, we would like to increase the cost of an elementary lunch from $3 to $3.25, and then to increase the price of a lunch at secondary school from $3.90 to $4. This is the first time that we've increased our lunch prices since 2017. So we request your approval to do that, beginning with next school year.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. Castillo.
Amen. Is there any adverse impact that we think could come from elasticity of demand consequences, that some kids might not end up buying as much in the way of lunch? Any, is this, do we really need to capture this additional revenue, and are there any consequences?
I truly believe that we do need the additional revenue as we look at the food service fund for last year. They lost money for the first time. We've really been working on increasing participation, and we do have salary increases for employees next year. Richard Kane has really tried to take a multi-year approach, so looking at not increasing lunch prices each year, but doing it every couple of years. So this, truly is the first time we've increased them in a couple of years. When we look at the lunch prices themselves, I know this sounds kind of strange, but for anyone paying cash, the $3.90, giving that dime back, takes additional time as we check out. So we're hoping that parents really see the $4 as something that's convenient, as well as $3.25. When we think of the adverse impact of families, one of the things that's been really clear this year is we don't have a solid policy in place for what to do for students that show up at lunch and don't have money to pay for lunch. So when you look at, we have really strong policies and practices in place in terms of serving our students that are eligible for free and reduced price meals. But what do we do with that student who shows up in the high school line and who doesn't have funding to pay for that lunch? So one of the things that we've really looked at is really formalizing our policy and allowing those students who don't have funding for lunch next school year to always be able to obtain a hot lunch. Right, so they won't be able to go through and get 6 Gatorades through a la carte, but if you have no funding on your account, really allowing that student and ensuring that they're able to get that hot lunch for the day. So we really hope that will mitigate any impacts for students who don't have money on that day, but we really will want to watch our participation. One of the things that's great about our program here is we really do cook our food from scratch, and we use healthy and nutritious meals. And we hope that as we continue to do that, and particularly as we move into the new high school, with the change in how we're going to serve those lunches through more of a scattered line approach versus a single line approach, that we'll really be able to continue to increase that participation and get more students to eat our healthy meals.
So this is a little bit off topic, and I don't know, this might be more of a Superintendent Noonan question, but do we currently have a policy or practice in place for meal delivery to, I guess specifically George Mason? Because I know that that's been a hot topic lately, and that there's some districts who are early schools that are developing policies that there's no Uber Eats, no, DoorDash, et cetera.
Yeah, there are a number of schools in the region that do limit that pretty extensively. I don't know that we necessarily have a policy around that right now. It is something that we can certainly talk with Mr. Hills and also with Ms. Hardy about. I think part of the issue that surrounds that just generally is disruption, safety and security. I think there's some solid gold reasons not to do it. I think that we do get into some issues around fairness and equity, who can get it, who can't get it. So I think those are all good questions to ask. My preference would be to be able to offer really good options so that kids won't have to do that. And I think that in the new high school with the new serving, as Ms. Michael suggested, the distributive serving opportunities that will be able to rival other places, but it's hard to beat some things that get delivered. But I'd like to get to know, I think one of the things that would be interesting would be to get to know how much that's actually happening, because I do think it is happening. I just don't know how much, and how much of it's also teachers that are doing it as well.
Yeah, because it just seems like that would be a disruption, not just to the front desk and having to deal with the security issue of it, but also just the time and energy it's taking staff to monitor that. So
Right.
I was just curious if that's something that's become a problem at the high school.
I haven't
or
heard
middle
it,
school.
but that doesn't mean it's not a problem. I just haven't heard about it from either of our principals at this point.
If there's no further questions, would someone please move to approve the new prices?
I move that the Falls Church School Board approve the following meal and milk prices for the 2019-2020 school year. Elementary school breakfast, $2.50. Secondary school breakfast, $2.50. Elementary school lunch, $3.25. Secondary school lunch, $4. Milk, 65 cents. Adult breakfast, $3.25. Adult lunch, $4.50.
Thank you, Ms. Liddon. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. All right. On to section 9.01, future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda items? All right. Seeing none, we'll go to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few things tonight. First, as I think everybody here knows, the last day of school is in 3 days, but who's counting? As always, there are many events happening this week in all of our schools, and just a few of them that I'd like to just sort of remind everybody of tonight. First, at Jesse Thackeray, the pre-K students visited Mount Daniel Elementary as part of their transition this last week, and it went really, really well. We saw lots of transitioning going across the system. Actually, TJ transitioned to Mary Ellen Henderson, and Henderson students went to the high school as well. But also at Jesse Thackeray on the 13th, we'll be celebrating Gertie's birthday. So you need to come, and if you're up for it, and help us with Gertie's birthday, which is actually Jesse Thackeray's actual birthday, is on the 13th. Mount Daniel, we did have field day without construction this year, which was well worth it and well worth the wait. It was a success. At TJ, our teachers are wrapping up with some pretty incredible, noteworthy projects that are happening. Our 5th grade, the PYP exhibitions were a great success, and our students were really proud of the projects. And we many of our staff were sponsors of teams or supports of teams that did projects as well. And I don't know who was more proud, the sponsors who helped or the kids, but it was really a great night. Fourth grade I Love Math Day was hosted yesterday with many professional visitors sharing why they love math. Students created inspirational math videos, poems, songs, and photography. Of note, yesterday we did have Senator Beyer with us, and also, Representative Beyer, excuse me, thank you. Representative Beyer and Delegate Simon was with us as well. Got that one right. Appreciated them coming out. Third grade, today our students presented their Geo Island projects. It's a new project led by the third grade team. It's been a year-long project that integrates science and social studies and meets the requirements for our PYP summative assessment and the Virginia SOLs and the performance-based assessment that goes with the Virginia SOLs. So it's a great example of these two things not being mutually exclusive, that IB and SOLs play really well together, and it was a great opportunity to highlight that. At Mary Ellen Henderson, the Spring Chorus Concert was held last week and 5 groups performed. The Field Day Extravaganza was today, and what a perfect day for Field Day. If you weren't outside, I'm sorry, but it really was beautiful. The 8th grade moving up ceremony is on Thursday, and we're looking forward to that. Congratulations to the George Mason class of 2019. The seniors on graduation, prior to graduation, walked the halls of Thomas Jefferson, Mount Daniel, and Mary Ellen Henderson in their caps and gowns to much applause of the students. It was a really great senior walk. It's a great community tradition. The graduation was a fitting celebration to celebrate their accomplishments, and everyone else was taking exams and finishing up their end of the year work, and they continue to do that until Friday. In the community, just as a reminder, I think we've got lots of information out there, but on Friday we will have the groundbreaking at George Mason High School for the new George Mason High School at 2 o'clock. We will be on the field between the stadium and Mary Ellen Henderson. We will have golden shovels and hard hats and lots of speakers, and we're looking forward to seeing Representative Beyer will be there. He RSVP'd today that he would be there. Marcus Simon will be there as well as our general government and all of you, and excited about that. They are going to start working right away. Information is going to go out this week about the new pickup and drop-off locations for summer camps and other on-site activities this summer. So we'll get those maps out right away. So as soon as anything in the summer begins, we'll make sure that there's a lot of information out there about where kids get dropped off. It should be pretty simple. We're excited about that. And then lastly, moving day awaits for many in the system. Next week, the 2nd grade is going to move to Mount Daniel. The 5th grade will move into the main building from the temporary building that's there. Other classrooms are going to be arranged, and then central office is going to move to our new location next Saturday, and have been working hard to get all of that taken care of. And a lot of that is through the really great work of Kristen Michael, the Chief Operating Officer, and her team, and we've had a lot of packing and a lot of movement happening. So I would ask of the board if there if you don't have too many demands over the next 3 weeks, that would be helpful. Only so we can get that move under our belt, all of the moves under our belt. But certainly, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask.
All right, board liaison comments. Mr. Webb?
Just briefly, it was attended the graduation. Ms. Litton and I kind of snuck in and hung out in the back. It was a great graduation. Always great to come to those events to see the work that we do of our teachers and, of course, our students. Culmination of so many of our students to graduate. And also wanted to highlight that I heard mentioned several times at the graduation of one of the most diverse classes that graduated from George Mason as well. I have this conversation in my home quite a bit of the diversity within the community, and always have to say that by being on the school board and in the schools, you actually do get to see some of the diversity that is in our community, where you may not see it as often walking around and in some of the other community events, but when you're in the schools, you actually get to see it and to hear it. Actually, I was kind of right about that, to see that, but it was a good thing. And thanks to everyone who took care of that. And that's it for me for tonight.
So just a wrap up for my committees. BIE is still looking for new members. We had a couple people leave, so if you know of any businesses you think would be good for the Business Education Advisory Committee, let me know. Or Mary Beth. Was at the Falls Church Education Foundation board meeting last night, and they're busy planning for next year. I'm also going over their budget and talking continually with Dr. Noonan regarding the potential for the vivarium, which is I guess how would you describe it, like a large greenhouse on the top of the building as part of the sustainability that we're looking into for the new high school. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that.
I would just go one step further to say that it's integrated into the school. It's a classroom that has a translucent roof that really can serve as a centerpiece, I think, for our sustainability work that's going on.
Yeah, so they're looking at, so it'd be something that would be used across the spectrum for, I guess, multiple disciplines to some extent, but then also for all levels and areas of students too. So it would be something that would be used by all the members of the school. And then the Professional Education Advisory Committee, the PEAK, still plugging along, and they've been having conversations about changes to the school calendar and have been giving some good feedback on that. And then the Health and Wellness Advisory Committee, Sue Dimick talked earlier about the great things that they've done over the past year and looking to the future and what they're wanting to focus on and some things that they have in the works. And then I guess just on a personal note, in celebration of Pride Month, I wanted to let everyone know that on June 25th, a family friend of ours actually has been working very hard over the past several years to put forth bipartisan, strongly supported bipartisan legislation that will be signed by Governor Northam, and regarding allowing, I guess, or easing the restrictions on same-sex couples being able to adopt in the state of Virginia. So it's a really exciting, and again, this is a family friend who they've been working really hard with the governor over this the past couple of years. So really excited to be a part of that bill signing.
I don't really have much to add. Special Ed Committee has wrapped up. We are still looking for one more new member, however, so if anybody knows of anybody who would like to be on that committee, please let me know.
And just to provide a range of opportunities, the Daycare Advisory Board is looking for a member, and we'll double whatever you guys pay.
Sure.
And I missed Parks and Rec because that was graduation day. So that's it for me.
Graduation was an exciting event, and the music was great as always. So I'll leave it at that. It was fun. It was actually really fun to be able to watch the whole process and see all the excitement. So that was a lot of fun. I missed the Gifted and Talented Advisory Committee meeting, but I can tell you we have a gap too, and we're doing triple whatever you guys are doing. Because James Weatherly has stepped down after completing his term, so we have a space to fill there. And then I went to Band Boosters meeting yesterday, and they also are planning for next year, and there should be some really cool stuff coming up. But it will start pretty fast, I think, when the new school year opens next year. So pay attention early in the year for some things coming up there, I think.
Great. I want to thank Mr. Anderson for pinch hitting at graduation and speaking for the board. It's my husband's 40th birthday, so I have missed many of his birthdays in the past, and this was not one I could miss. So thank you very much for representing the board so well. And I went to a chamber meeting this morning. They're still trying to figure out what the chamber is and what it does. They're doing a lot of strategic planning. So they really are trying to work out how they can better support businesses in the community. It's a really wonderful chamber with really supports, but that is literally what's happening. So, but it's a great group. So if you are a local business owner, I would recommend that you join. And next we have approval of minutes. for May 7th and May 22nd. To ask for unanimous consent to approve those minutes. Great, thank you. And there's materials for you to review. And next, we will move on to our second closed meeting. Someone please move us into that meeting. Shannon.
Pursuant to the Virginia Freedom Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter, personnel under section 2.2-3711A1, in particular, superintendent's annual evaluation.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Litton. All those in favor? Great.